Chapter 1. The inciting incident. A pall of spring perfume hung heavy over Belgrave Square as the last rays of afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Hawthorne Hall. Lady Marguerite Pembroke, the celebrated florist whose exotic arrangements had graced every grand occasion in London society, lay still in the centre of her workshop, her once vibrant eyes glazed with an unnatural calm. The riotous blooms she had nurtured, orchids, peonies, and lilies, seemed suddenly macabre, their petals stark against the gleaming mahogany table and the faint pool spreading across the checkered floor. It was Inspector Davis of Scotland Yard who first raised the alarm. A respectable, methodical man, Davis had arrived at Hawthorne Hall on a crisp Tuesday morning following a distressing telegram from Lady Pembroke's niece, Miss Evelyn Cresswell, who had found her aunt unresponsive when she arrived to deliver fresh iris stems. When Davis entered the workshop, he noted immediately the precise absence of any sign of forced entry. The French door stood gently ajar, as though welcoming the killer in the same courteous manner with which Lady Pembroke received her most distinguished clientele. The inspector's gloved fingers hovered over the body, careful not to disturb a single hairpin or petal. No immediate sign of violence, he murmured to his junior constable, who frowned in puzzlement at the delicate clasp of Lady Pembroke's hands resting serenely on her lap. A single white rose lay beside her, its stem trimmed at an exact 45-degree angle. By chance, Hercule Poirot was in London that week, his visit ostensibly to assist in another matter of missing jewels at a private collection in Mayfair. He received Davis's summons with polite surprise. A florist's widow. Nest's pause, Poirot murmured as he crossed the threshold of the workshop. His dark moustaches twitched ever so slightly, betraying interest. But this is not a mere widow. There is, how you say, something theatrical about her demise. Poirot's keen eyes, framed by the soft gleam of his bowler hat, surveyed the scene, the meticulous alignment of tools on the workbench, the spatter pattern of the crimson stain, and, most intriguing of all, the faint smudge of lavender oil on the brass doorknob. He crouched, extending a gloved finger to trace an almost imperceptible trail of disturbed dust leading to a small cabinet set into the wall. Inside lay a half-open ledger, its pages listing orders in precise script, deadline after deadline, of weddings, funerals, and lavish soirees. The killer knew her schedule, Poirot observed softly. They have studied her habits, and perhaps her tragedies. But look here, he added, lifting a single slip of parchment from beneath the ledger. It bore an address in Bath and a hastily scrawled time. Midnight. Do not fail me again. No signature followed. Above the doorway, a discreet plaque read in gilded letters, Pembroke Floor Latelier. It was a workshop open to a select clientele, ambassadors, titled ladies, and wealthy merchants who prized Lady Pembroke's uncanny talent for expressing emotion through flower. Outside, a discreet crowd had gathered, chauffeurs in dark uniforms, a handful of fashionable ladies whose feathers and lace trailed behind them, and Miss Evelyn herself, her pale face suffused with both grief and resolve. Every suspect will have motive, Poirot said, standing and brushing an errant rose petal from his coat. But our task is to discern which among them could possess such calm cruelty. He approached Evelyn Cresswell, whose eyes glistened despite her composure. Mademoiselle, I offer my condolences. Tell me, when was the last time you saw Lady Pembroke alive? Evelyn's voice wavered. Last night, Monsieur Poirot, well past midnight. I delivered the irises to Lord Ashcombe's ball at Montague House. She was working late, as she often did, preparing special bouquets for tomorrow's spring fete. But I returned this morning, and the doors were unlocked. She did not answer my calls. Poirot nodded, his grey cells already whirring with connection and contradiction. She trusted her niece implicitly. Yes, who else knew of her nocturnal labours? Evelyn hesitated. Lips pressed then. Only her secretary, Mr. Philip Parks, and occasionally Mr. Geoffrey Calhoun, the event planner. Lady Pembroke was considering an expansion, possibly opening a branch in Bath, which is why you see that address on the slip. But until now, no one knew she would travel there tonight. Curious. Poirot murmured. He surveyed the crowd. Again, the event planner, Mr. Calhoun, stood a measured distance away, speaking in low tones to a portly gentleman with a commanding air, Lord Ashcombe himself, a patron who had commissioned dozens of elaborate displays. The secretary, Mr. Parks, hovered near the entrance, his face a mask of practiced calm, though the slight tremor in his fingers suggested a more turbulent interior. Poirot moved to examine the scene more closely. He noted that the single white rose by the body was not among the dozens ranged meticulously in vases round the room. It appeared to have been placed deliberately. White roses in Lady Pembroke's parlance symbolized innocence, yet the cut angle and the precision of the placement spoke of mockery. Perhaps an ironic flourish from a murderer with a taste for drama, and this, Poirot said, pointing to a cluster of violet petals on the floor, were not part of original arrangement. They have been stepped upon, crushed slightly. Someone moved through here after positioning the rose. Yes, Inspector Davis nodded, frowning. I observed them when I entered. I assumed they fell accidentally. Poirot shook his head. No, none. None. These petals suggest something more deliberate, a message, perhaps, or simply a careless murderer. He stood, looking at Lady Pembroke's serene face. She was an artist in her own domain, transforming petals into meaning. Her killer has done the same. In reverse, the inspector cleared his throat. Monsieur Poirot, what is your theory? Then, patience, mon ami. Poirot turned toward the silent onlookers. Lady Pembroke's death is but the first act, for in her workshop, every object, every bloom, becomes a character in a play revealing secrets, hinting at lies. We must learn to read their language. At that moment, the grand clock in the hallway chimed 2 o'clock. Evelyn covered her mouth, stifling a sob. She should have gone to Bath by now. She whispered, I sent her a message this morning. Poirot's eyes glinted, indeed. Our next step is to discover who expected her in Bath and who stood to lose by her absence. Come, Inspector Davis, let us begin our inquiries. As the detectives measured, footsteps echoed across the tiled floor. The late afternoon sun dipped below the rooftops of Belgrave Square, and the workshop's shadows deepened. Within those shadows lay more than spilled flowers. There lay hidden motives, buried betrayals, and the silent promise of further tragedy. And only the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot could hope to untangle the thorny path that led from the petals of deceit to the heart of murderous intent. Chapter 2. The first clues following morning. Hawthorne Hall's workshop lay hushed. Under a fragile veil of dawnlight, the grand windows, their mullions still stained faintly with yesterday's dust, admitted pale rays that scattered across the tiled floor like restless ghosts. Inspector Davis and Hercule Poirot arrived together, the inspector lugging a satchel bulging with evidence bags and notebooks, while Poirot carried only his customary cane and a slender leather portfolio. Poirot paused at the threshold, his dark eyes sweeping the scene as though reading a familiar manuscript. Observe, Inspector, he murmured, gesturing to the scattered violet petals at the base of the large pot of lavender by the side table. These are not mere debris. They have been disturbed after the tragedy. Yes, Davis frowned, milling. To examine them, I catalogue these as part of the general floral array, but you believe they hold significance. Mais oui, Poirot replied, placing a gloved finger on a petal crushed at its edge. Note the bruising here. Someone trod inadvertently upon them, yet the heel prints are absent. This suggests the disturbance occurred before the body was discovered. Perhaps moments after the crime, the inspector peered closer. Then someone lingered in the workshop other than the murderer to tamper with the scene. More cleverly, the killer themselves returned to carve a red herring. Poirot straightened and picked up a small glass vial from the workbench. The vial, no larger than a thimble, contained a few drops of clear liquid. This was not part of Lady Pembroke's supplies. She would never employ such a vessel. He noted. Her oils and essences rested in ornate glass bottles, each labelled in her distinctive copperplate script. Davis took the vial gingerly. Could it be poison? But there was no sign of ingestion. She was found seated, serene. Precisely, Poirot murmured, examining the label embossed on the vial's stopper, a tiny fleur-de-lis. He closed his eyes momentarily, as if recalling a half-remembered detail. This emblem belongs to a niche perfumery in Bath Maison de Lavande. A curious coincidence. None. Bath again. Davis muttered, between this and the slip of parchment. Bath looms large. Lady Pembroke was due to inspect a prospective Vatelier there tonight, if she had lived. Indeed. Let us bag this vial as evidence and send it for analysis. But more must be unearthed here. Poirot returned to the body's resting place. He crouched beside Lady Pembroke's right hand and carefully lifted the single white rose. He turned it round, inspecting the cut stem. Notice the angle, he said, tracing the razor-sharp 45 degrees. No florist would cut a stem so clinical, almost surgical. Yet someone wished to mock her art. Davis recorded every detail. Diligently. You think the rose was placed intentionally? Unquestionably. A symbol of innocence laid upon a victim. But whose innocence? Our victim. Or perhaps the true culprit who seeks to portray themselves as innocent. Poirot rose, tucking the rose into a small paper envelope. Now, the ledger. He moved to the built-in cabinet and retrieved the half-open book. The pages bore order entries in Lady Pembroke's immaculate hand. He flipped through them until he found the page where the Bath address had been noted. 2 lines below, a new entry. Mr. Oswald Kent. Special arrangement. Urgent delivery. The script was hurried, the letters jutting at odd angles. Unlike her usual precision, Poirot studied the name, Oswald Kent. He murmured, I do not recall him among her regular clients. Inspector Davis rifled through his notes. No mention during interviews. Neither Evelyn nor Mr. Pox nor Mr. Calhoun referred to him. Curious, Poirot said. Let us inquire about Mr. Kent immediately. But first, a closer look at the door. Yesterday, I noticed the lavender oil smudge on the brass knob. Combined with these violet petals, it suggests our killer used lavender to mask something or to mislead us entirely. He tapped the doorknob. We must swab this for any residual traces. While Davis prepared his swabs, Poirot's attention drifted to the fireplace hearth. Among the ashes lay a solitary matchstick. Its charred and unremarkable save for the faint scent of bergamot. Poirot retrieved it, holding it to his nose. This match has been used in a chamber cigar, a particularly expensive brand. Lady Pembroke despised smoking indoors. Therefore, the match must belong to someone else. He sealed it in a specimen bag. Let us compare this with the ashtray in Lord Ashcombe's suite across the courtyard. I suspect a connection. At that moment, Miss Evelyn Cresswell entered, accompanied by Mr. Philip Parkes, Lady Pembroke's secretary. Evelyn's face was drawn, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. Parkes looked pale and twitchy, as though every fibre of his being hummed with nervous energy. Evelyn, Mr. Parkes, Poirot greeted them. I trust you both slept well. Given the circumstances, Evelyn forced a small nod, as well as one can sleep in grief. Monsieur Poirot, thank you for joining us. We found several curious items among your aunt's equipment vial. From Maison de Lavande, an entry for a Mr. Oswald Kent, and evidence of lavender oil on the doorknob. Do either of you know Mr. Kent? Parks swallowed hard. No, sir. I've never heard of him. His gaze flicked anxiously toward Evelyn, who looked back in silent compassion. I see, Poirot said gently. And the lavender oil. Your aunt sometimes experimented with new fragrances. Did she mention attempting a lavender blend recently? Evelyn hesitated. She spoke of exploring a new scent inspired by her mother's garden in Normandy peony, and lavender. But that was weeks ago. Poirot's moustaches twitched. Weeks ago, but not yesterday. These petals, he indicated the violet fragments by Parks's shoes, were trampled before the body was discovered. And this match, he held aloft the charred fragment, suggests someone smoked a cigar here. Did either of you notice ash or smell smoke? Parks looked startled. No, sir. I would have noticed. Lady Pembroke insisted on a smoke-free environment. And yet, Poirot replied, we have evidence to the contrary. Inspector, please note this discrepancy. We have an uninvited visitor, or someone crossing into forbidden areas. Our perpetrator is bold or reckless, as Parks visibly trembled. Evelyn placed a calming hand on his arm. Poirot studied her. Miss Cresswell, I also noted that your arrival this morning found the doors unlocked. You delivered irises to Lord Ashcombe's ball last night, you said so yourself. Tell me, did you lock up after you left? Evelyn's brow furrowed. I thought Mr. Parks did. He stayed late to sort invoices. Poirot turned to Parks. You remained here after Miss Cresswell left. Parks nodded. His voice barely above a whisper. Yes, monsieur. I had to finalize the accounts. I found Lady Pembroke asleep. As she often worked late, she seemed peaceful. I did not disturb her. He swallowed. Then I locked the doors and went to the servants' quarters to rest. When Evelyn returned, she called me. Poirot's face was inscrutable. Very well. We will verify your account with the servants' log. But regardless, our key clues remain: the lavender oil, the unfamiliar name in the ledger, the surgical rose, and the cigar match. Each of these will guide us toward the culprit. Evelyn offered a small nod of understanding, while Parks exhaled, relief mingling with fresh anxiety. Inspector Davis signaled to a constable to escort them elsewhere for further questioning. Once they were gone, Poirot whispered to Davis, the challenge is to discern which clue is genuine and which is planted. The murderer desires to mislead us, so we must be even more vigilant. We shall follow the lavender trail to Bath. But first, we must learn who Mr. Oswald Kent is, and whether that perfume reconnects our suspects. He rose, smoothing his coat. Let us proceed to question Lord Ashcombe and examine his suits. Private Ashtray. I anticipate surprises. As they departed the workshop, the violet petals lay quiet testament to secrets yet unrevealed. And the morning light's golden fingers seemed to beckon them down a path strewn with deceptions. Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, piecing together a puzzle that refused to yield its final image yet. Chapter 3. The gathering of suspects be mid-morning. Hawthorne Hall's grand salon had been readied for a formal assembly. Heavy damask curtains were drawn back to reveal walls lined with gilded mirrors and portraits of Pembroke ancestors, their painted eyes seeming to watch the proceedings. At Poirot's request, Miss Evelyn Cresswell ranged seating in a semicircle, each suspect facing the detective and Inspector Davis. One by one, they entered Lord Frederick Ashcombe, the family's most generous patron, swept into the room with an hurried grace, a tall man of 60. His silver hair was impeccably combed, and his tailored morning coat bespoke wealth. He had commissioned Lady Pembroke to supply the floral centerpieces for his upcoming spring fete event of such grandeur that London society would hush to admire it. Yet behind his courteous smile lay a flicker of impatience. His ledger showed an overdue invoice for £2,000. Was his generosity sincere or a debt driven for Wade? Geoffrey Calhoun, the event planner, followed. In his mid-30s, he wore a rumpled waistcoat and carried a pocket notebook bulging with sketches. His eyes darted restlessly, as though chasing ideas in midair. He coordinated every detail of high society gatherings, a role that afforded him both prestige and a handsome commission. But rumours whispered that his latest contract threatened to fall apart without Lady Pembroke's legendary arrangements. His livelihood, and thus motive, depended on her timely performance. Philip Parks, the secretary, entered with measured steps. His dark suit was immaculate. Though his hands trembled as he clutched a ledger, he had managed Lady Pembroke's business affairs for 5 years, earning her trust and a comfortable salary. Yet rumours in the servants' quarters spoke of recent financial strain, debts incurred from a brother's reckless ventures. Could Philip have turned desperate enough to silence his employer for a hidden fortune? Miss Iris Delacroix, the perfumery representative from Maison de Lavande, arrived last. Petite and elegant, she wore a lavender-hued silk gown and carried a small leather case containing her employer's signature scents. She had travelled from Bath to negotiate an exclusive line of floral-inspired fragrances with Lady Pembroke. Both women had admired one another's artistry until whispered disagreements surfaced over botanical sourcing and profit shares. Was professional rivalry strong enough to escalate into murder? Poirot stood before them, steepling his fingers. His gaze rested briefly on each face, noting minute tells, Lord Ashcombe's restless shifting of weight, Calhoun's tightening of his jaw, Parks's darting eyes, and Delacroix's forced composure. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice calm and precise. Thank you for assembling on such short notice, and fortunately, we gather under tragic circumstances. Lady Pembroke has been taken from us, and among you sits the person responsible. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Each of you had opportunity and motive. But motive alone is not guilt. We must examine your relationships with the deceased and the small discrepancies that rise above mere coincidence. Inspector Davis stepped forward with a ledger. We have a list of recent communications and financial records pertaining to Lady Pembroke's business. Please clarify these entries. Poirot's eyes flicked to Calhoun, who swallowed. Mr. Calhoun, your notation here reads advance payment withheld until floral concept approved. You requested a 25% reduction on your fee. Is that correct? Calhoun nodded. Voice tight. Yes, monsieur. I suggested a discount because production costs soared. I thought our understanding would prevent conflict. Yet, Poirot observed, your suggestion implies tension. If Lady Pembroke refused, your reputation would suffer. He turned to Ashcombe, Lord Ashcombe. Your payment for last week's commission remains outstanding. You wrote to her, settled by the 1st of May, yet no funds were received. Might that have caused friction? Ashcombe's brow creased. I intended to pay. My son's health emergency diverted the funds, but I would never harm Marguerite for a delay. Poirot inclined his head. I sympathize with your families. Misfortune. But financial pressure can drive men to extremes. He opened his portfolio and produced a narrow slip of paper. Miss Delacroix, this is your note, sent to Lady Pembroke 2 days ago. We cannot delay. Exclusivity agreement required immediately. You pressed her to commit to costly terms without regard for our schedule. Could frustration have led to violence? Delacroix's lips parted, her violet eyes glistening. We disagreed. Yes, but I left peacefully. My only concern was artistic integrity. Poirot held up a small vial. And yet, this identical bottle was found at the scene. He indicated the perfumed oil from Maison de Lavande. Delacroix's face flickered. Your company logo is embossed on the stopper. She exhaled. Placing her case on a side table, I delivered samples yesterday morning, but I never entered her workshop. The vial was among her personal trials. Perhaps she misplaced it. Perhaps, Poirot repeated. Or perhaps it was placed to mislead us. He turned to Parks. Mr. Parks, you managed her accounts. You would know her cash reserves better than anyone. Yet I find no record of significant payments to Maison de Lavande, nor of any trip to Bath. He raised an eyebrow. Yet your loyalty offends suspicion. You claim to have locked the doors and retired early. But why? Do I find your fingerprints on the door's interior latch and none on the keys? Parks's face paled. I returned to check her notes before leaving. She often left work on her desk. I did not think to log that. Poirot's mustaches twitched, a plausible oversight yet. It conflicts with Evelyn's statement that you departed before the hour of 1. Inspector, note this inconsistency. He closed the ledger and looked round the room. There is one more person to consider, from a small side table. He lifted a folded letter addressed in Lady Pembroke's handwriting. Opening it, he read, aloud, My dearest friend, meet me at Bath railway station at midnight. We must discuss. He paused, handing it to Evelyn, who shook. You knew of this correspondence. Evelyn took the letter with trembling fingers. No, never. I asked her about the Bath excursion. She said it was a perfumery meeting. Poirot turned back to the assembled. This secret engagement suggests a confidant beyond your number. Our circle is incomplete. He folded the letter. Between the rose's surgical cut, the lavender oil, and this clandestine appointment, we see strands weaving toward Bath and possibly beyond this room. He swept his gaze over them one last time. You may now depart, but I ask you to remain available. We shall continue our inquiries individually. Remember, the truth is not only where actions point, but also where they divert us from the genuine path. Until then. They withdrew one by one, nerves frayed and suspicions kindled. In each mind, Calhoun bit his lip. Ashcombe's composure slipped for a heartbeat. Delacroix clutched her case as though it were a talisman. Parks exhaled shakily. Evelyn's eyes brimmed with newfound fear. When the door finally closed, Poirot turned to Davis. The gathering is complete. We now know who had reason, who had opportunity, and who lies best tomorrow. We pursue the false leads and isolate the genuine clues for tonight. Let us reflect on these revelations. The heart of the mystery remains concealed, but our net draws tighter. Inspector Davis nodded. As they left the salon, a gentle breeze stirred the curtains, sending a drift of violet petals across the marble floor, a silent reminder that amid beauty and grace, deceit lies waiting to bloom. Chapter 4. Poirot arrives late that afternoon. Hercule Poirot found himself once again at Hawthorne Hall. But this time his investigation led him beyond the florist's workshop and into the private apartments of the key suspects. With Inspector Davis in tow, he resolved to inspect Lord Ashcombe's suite, Mr. Calhoun's temporary office at the adjacent conservatory, and, finally, the perfumery sample room at Bath House. Though the weather remained fair, the murmur of rain in the distance seemed an omen, each drop a harbinger of revelations to come. The corridor leading to Lord Ashcombe's quarters was hushed and carpeted in a deep burgundy. Muffling footsteps as Poirot and Davis approached the polished mahogany door, Poirot produced his card. Inspector Davis and Monsieur Poirot request immediate entry. A footman admitted them promptly, revealing a large salon adorned with silver candelabras and a wide fireplace, above which hung Portrait of a younger Ashcombe in military uniform. Observe, Inspector, Poirot whispered, crossing to a low table beside a velvet armchair. On the table sat a silver ashtray, its surface mottled with faint grey ash and to stub cigar ends. Poirot lifted one with his tweezers, inspecting its brand. Cohiba Behike 56. He traced the rim with a delicate finger. Note the absence of any ash beyond the tray's edge. This suggests fastidious cleaning. Yet one remnant betrays haste. He tapped the ashtray. The matchstick from the workshop matches the brand of cigar served here. Our murderer smoked while awaiting Lady Pembroke's arrival. Inspector Davis nodded, carefully bagging the ashtray. But Lady Pembroke despised smoke indoors. Were you aware, my lord Ashcombe? Summoned by a discreet summons, entered, and bowed politely. Indeed, monsieur, Ashcombe replied smoothly. My late wife shared her dislike for tobacco, but I confess to an occasional cigar in solitude. He touched his lapel. I keep the ashtray for my own discretion. I regret any association with Lady Pembroke's death. Poirot studied him. You awoke at midnight, my lord, to prepare for this afternoon's council on the fate. Did you notice any disturbance in your quarters? Ashcombe hesitated. Nothing out of the ordinary. I heard no footsteps in the hall and slept deeply. Poirot inclined his head. Very well. We shall verify with your staff. Merci, Lord Ashcombe, as the peer bowed and withdrew. Poirot turned to Davis. Our assassin visited this suite. Perhaps after the murder, to leave a calling card. The ashtray serves as a diversion. Our motive here is misdirection, to implicate Lord Ashcombe's nocturnal habits. Next, they proceeded to the conservatory, where Calhoun had set up a temporary office amid potted palms and glass tables. It smelled faintly of damp foliage, and sunlight filtered through leaded panes in shifting patterns. Calhoun rose from a wicker chair at the center, his hands trembling as he closed a leather-bound sketchbook. Monsieur Poirot, he greeted, voice tight. I trust you have questions. He perched on the edge of the chair, legs crossed nervously. Simply two. Observe. Geoffrey, Poirot replied, scanning the room. On one table lay event layouts, place cards, and a solitary sprig of lavender, its buds crushed. Poirot picked up the sprig, inhaling lightly. Lavender again, he murmured. Curious how our fragrant friend recurs. Calhoun blinked. I misplaced that sprig yesterday while sketching centerpiece ideas. I discarded it carelessly, and this Poirot indicated a small slip of paper clipped to one of the sketches. It bore a hastily drawn floor plan of Bath Railway Station's east platform, labeled 12 o'clock. Calhoun's eyes darted downward. I was preparing a note for Lady Pembroke about visiting Bath, but I never sent it. His voice wavered. She preferred the perfumer's direct invitation. Poirot pocketed the sketch. Indeed. Yet this plan suggests you expected her departure at noon. Why did she instead schedule for midnight? Calhoun swallowed. I only wished her to meet the perfumer earlier, to expedite our contract. Poirot tapped his cane. Perhaps. But the divergence between noon and midnight hints that someone else dictated the timing. We shall see who benefits from patience or urgency. He rose. Thank you, Monsieur Calhoun. Remain available for further queries, as Calhoun nodded and attempted a brittle smile. Poirot whispered to Davis, the sketch is genuine, but the timing misalignment points to a deeper hand guiding events. By late afternoon, Poirot and Davis arrived at Bath House, the city's premier perfumery showroom, where Miss Delacroix awaited them among rows of delicate vials and polished mirrors. The scent of violet and rosemary mingled in the air, lending the room a heady atmosphere. Miss Delacroix, Poirot greeted, inclining his head. Thank you for receiving us. I am honored, Monsieur Poirot, she replied, smoothing a lavender gown. Please. "Make yourselves comfortable," she led them to a marble-topped table upon which sat 7 whole perfumed oils among them, the all from the mystery vial. Poirot examined the bottle closely. "Explain the composition," he said. "Is this a custom blend?" Delacroix's fingers brushed a vial labelled Normandy Reverie. "This is the prototype my company prepared for Lady Pembroke, a marriage, of peony and lavender, in homage to her mother's garden. I sent it with a note suggesting her approval, and you never entered her workshop." Poirot inquired, eyes sharp. "I did not," she insisted. "The samples were delivered by courier. I remained here to oversee preparations." Poirot uncorked the vial, inhaling deeply. "This blend is exquisite, yet faint traces of bergamot linger." He presented the match fragment. "Do you use these matches here?" Delacroix took the fragment, inspecting it. "Yes, we use chamber cigars for our exclusive clients." She paused. "But I locked the door after finishing here. At noon. No one entered thereafter." Poirot nodded, sealing the fragment. "Very well. One final question. Do you recognize this signature?" He produced a small, water-stained envelope bearing a monogram. Quai Delacroix's expression faltered. "Oswald Kent." She exhaled. "He is our regional distributor. He arranged shipments to Bath. I did not think he dealt directly with Lady Pembroke, but correspondence passed through my office." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Our mysterious Mr. Kent surfaces once more. He arranged for a midnight meeting. Yet our victim never arrived. Instead, she met her. And here, I suspect Mr. Kent's rule is more than perfunctory." Delacroix offered a reluctant nod. "I will provide you with his contact and records of correspondence as dusk fell." Poirot and Davis returned to Hawthorne Hall, their satchels, heavier with evidence, in the workshop. Lady Pembroke's ledger lay open on the table, its pages awaiting their scrutiny. Poirot placed a hand on the table's edge. "We have visited 3 domains of suspicion: the patron's quarters, the planner's haven, and the perfumer's sanctum. Each offers truth and deception in equal measure. Financial debt, contractual urgency, and botanical rivalry intertwine in a complex web." Inspector Davis set down the evidence specs. "And Mr. Oswald Kent, he remains an enigma." "Indeed," Poirot agreed. "Tomorrow we shall pay him a visit. But tonight, let us reflect on what has transpired. Consider the broken timeline of Bath, the presence of lavender in every realm, and the surgical precision of the rose. The murderer plays a game with us, leading our little grey cells in circles of intrigue. Yet truth lies at the heart of patterns." He glanced toward the window, where the first stars appeared. "Rest well, Inspector, for when the sun rises, we pursue the true path where motive, means, and opportunity converge in one mind." Inspector Davis nodded, fatigue evident in his posture. As the 2 detectives departed the workshop, the shadows lengthened among the petals and tools. Silent witnesses to the hidden designs of a calculating killer. Chapter 5. Initial Interviews. Begins next morning. The sun rose pale over Belgrave Square, casting a muted light across Hawthorne Hall, in the hushed grandeur of Lady Pembroke's drawing room. Poirot set up his modest interview table, a simple writing bureau, to straight-backed chairs, and a silver tray bearing tea and biscuits. Inspector Davis stood by the window, his notebook at the ready. One by one, the suspects would be summoned for a questioning, each session carefully timed to allow Poirot's little grey cells to ferment the truth from their words. Interview with Philip Parks. Philip Parks entered first, his shoulders hunched and eyes cast downward. Poirot offered him a cup of tea, which he accepted with a trembling hand. "Monsieur Parks," Poirot began gently, "you have served Lady Pembroke faithfully for 5 years. Tell me about the night of the murder. What tasks did you perform after Miss Cresswell departed?" Parks cleared his throat. I stayed to finalize the accounts. I reconciled her invoices, tallied the day's sales, and locked the doors at 1 o'clock precisely, as instructed. He paused, stirring his tea. Then I went to the servants' quarters to rest. I returned when I heard Evelyn's knock. Indeed, Poirot said, watching Parks's fingers drum against the porcelain. Yet we discovered your fingerprints on the interior doorknob, and the door itself was found ajar. Violet petals underfoot. Explain that discrepancy. Parks's face paled. I must have forgotten to secure it properly in my haste. He swallowed. I was under pressure, my brother's debts. The risk of losing my post if the business faltered. But I swear, I had no ill intent toward Lady Pembroke. Poirot nodded slowly. Pressure can cloud one's memory, but pressure can also steer action. You handled her private correspondence. You would know of this midnight meeting in Bath. Did you intercept any letters? Parks hesitated. No, monsieur. I filed her letters as usual. I was unaware of any message to Bath until this morning. Poirot leaned forward. And the lavender oil on the doorknob, do you have access to her personal scents? Parks shook his head, only to catalogue them. The oils were stored in her cabinet. I never experimented with them, as Parks rose to leave. Poirot observed the tremor in his voice and the weariness in his stance. Merci. Monsieur Parks, your candour is appreciated. Parks departed, leaving Poirot to annotate Davis's ledger. Parks' stress motive, possible oversight or concealment. Interview with Lord Frederick Ashcombe next. Lord Ashcombe entered with dignified composure. Poirot offered him a seat and a biscuit. Lord Ashcombe, you informed us that you prepared for this afternoon's fete in solitude, indulging in a cigar. Yet the ashtray in your suite yielded evidence linking you to the workshop. Explain. Ashcombe inclined his head. Monsieur Poirot, I assure you I never visited the florist's workshop. I smoked in my suite to calm my nerves over my son's health. Perhaps someone used my cigar to implicate me. Poirot regarded him with polite curiosity. A clever stratagem, yet why choose you? You held no grievance against Lady Pembroke, save a minor payment delay. None at all, Ashcombe replied. She was a dear friend. I intended to settle the invoice this morning. Poirot tapped his cane. But your funds were diverted unexpectedly. Could resentment have brewed? Ashcombe's eyes darkened. Resentment. Never. I would give anything for Margaret's counsel in these trying times. Poirot sipped his tea. Very well. Let us speak of your movements between midnight and dawn. Who can corroborate your presence in the suite? My valet, Thomas. He brought my nightcap at 12:30, and did not return until dawn. Ashcombe smiled faintly. He can confirm I remained in bed thereafter. Thank you, Poirot said. He rose, inclining his head. I shall verify with your staff. Your cooperation is most helpful. As Ashcombe withdrew, Poirot noted in his ledger Ashcombe's solid alibi, possible frame-up target. Interview with Geoffrey Calhoun. Geoffrey Calhoun entered the room next. His suit slightly rumpled from nerves. Poirot gestured to a chair. Monsieur Calhoun, yesterday we found your floor plan of Bath Station and a discarded lavender sprig in your conservatory. Explain their significance. Calhoun swallowed. I sketched the plan to remind Lady Pembroke of the earlier meeting time. I suggested noon. I misplaced the sprig while drafting ideas and removed it afterward. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Yet the timing of noon versus midnight persisted. Someone dictated the later hour. Who might have influence over your schedule? Calhoun hesitated. Lady Pembroke insisted on a night rendezvous for discretion, something about secrecy with Miss Delacroix. He looked away. I assumed it concerned the perfume contract. And this evening, Poirot continued, You admitted to planting debris in the workshop to guide my investigation. You hoped to divert suspicion. Calhoun's face went ashen. No, never. I only tried to salvage my commission by fixing. The meeting earlier. I had nothing to do with her death. Poirot studied him. Then why did you erase an entire page of sketches last night? The nib marks were still faint. Calhoun's eyes widened. I changed my centerpiece design. I did it in the workshop after everyone left. Poirot tapped his cane once. Alone in the workshop. After midnight. Calhoun nodded miserably. Thank you for your candor. I will verify your sketches. You may go. As Calhoun hurried away. Poirot recorded. Calhoun's suspect for opportunity. Possible overreaction. Interview with Miss Iris Delacroix finally. Miss Delacroix entered, carrying her lavender-scented portfolio. Poirot greeted her with gentle formality. Mademoiselle Delacroix, you professed never to have entered the workshop. Yet your oil was found there. How did that occur? Delacroix's lips trembled. I sent the samples by courier, never entered. Myself. I left at noon and returned here. Poirot leaned forward. But the courier service logs reveal delivery at 1:30, contradicting your departure time. Delacroix's breath caught. I may have accompanied the courier, too. Ensure safe transit. Then I returned afterward. Why conceal the detail? Poirot asked softly. Why not admit it openly? Delacroix looked down. I feared professional judgment that admitting myself would seem impetuous. And this vial, Poirot, held up the mason de lavande bottle. There's traces of bergamot and a matchstick identical to the one in your showroom. You smoked Cohiba Bihike. She nodded reluctantly. I have learned to tolerate a cigar in business settings, her voice quavered. I never meant harm to Lady Pembroke. Poirot offered her a biscuit and observed her delicate fingers. Very well. One final question. You knew of Mr. Oswald Kent's monogram. Did you inform Lady Pembroke of his involvement? Delacroix shook her head. No. He handled regional distribution. I thought it irrelevant to her decisions, Poirot. Rose. Merci. Mademoiselle. You may retire. As she left, Poirot jotted. Delacroix concealment of courier presence. Professional rivalry motive. With all interviews concluded, Poirot leaned back in his chair. Folding his fingers, Inspector Davis watched him expectantly. What have we learned? Mon ami. Poirot began to speak softly. Drawing threads together. Parks is under duress, but offers no clear admission. Eshcombe appears genuine yet was framed by the cigar. Calhoun had opportunity and confusion over timing. Delacroix concealed an escort, suggesting fear of scrutiny. Each has motive financial pressure, ut favors, threatened commissions and professional rivalry. He paused, tapping his cane, and then there is Mr. Oswald Kent, the silent orchestrator. His name looms behind the scenes, but it is not only who benefits, but who profits imperceptibly. Inspector Davis nodded. Shall we pursue him next week? Poirot replied, rising. We shall visit Bath tonight. There we will uncover his role, and perhaps expose the true culprit who has written the final lines of our tragedy in violet ink. As they gathered their coats, the morning sun glinted off the drawing-room mirrors, an echo of Poirot's steely resolve. The interviews had stirred the waters of suspicion. It was time to plunge deeper into the currents and discover what lay. Hidden beneath, Chapter 6, first false lead night had fully descended by the time Hercule Poirot and Inspector Davis alighted at Bath Spa Station. The platform was nearly deserted, lit by the pale glow of gas lamps that cast long shadows against the worn stone. A chill wind whispered through the arches, carrying with it the faint scent of lavender from the nearby perfumery district. Poirot drew his coat tighter and turned to Davis. Here we are, mon ami, he said quietly. Our first appointment, Mr. Oswald Kent. Let us see whether he holds the truth or simply another veil of deception. They crossed the deserted square and arrived at Kent & Co. Aromatics, a modest storefront whose windows gleamed with soft lamplight inside. Rows of glass bottles glistened like jewels on polished shelves. A brass plaque beside the door. Read, Oswald Kent, Master Purveyor of Rare Essences. Poirot lifted his cane and tapped gently before entering. A tall man in a dark velvet jacket stood behind the counter. Oswald Kent himself. His coal-black hair was slicked back, and his eyes sharp and calculating flew open as Poirot introduced. Then, Monsieur Kent, thank you for receiving us at this late hour. I trust you are familiar with Lady Pembroke's unfortunate demise. Kent inclined his head, expression neutral. Truly a tragedy. Detective, I only hope justice is served. His voice was smooth, but his fingers tapped restlessly on the counter. Poirot smiled benignly. We have reason to believe you arranged a midnight meeting with the deceased at Bath Station. He produced the slip of parchment from Section 1. Your monogram OK appears here. Care to explain? Kent's eyes flicked to the paper, and back to Poirot. My monogram. Yes. I sent a note asking to meet in private concerning a confidential shipment of rare lavender, absinthe, and experimental essence I believed she would wish to commissary. Unforhardly, he paused. I arranged the meeting for midnight, knowing she preferred discretion. Inspector Davis unfolded his notebook. But we have testimony that the note arrived only this morning, well after your courier's departure. How then could she have received it in time? Kent's posture stiffened. Perhaps it was delayed in transit. Our records show the courier left Bath at 4 in the afternoon, reaching London just before midnight. He narrowed his eyes, but courier schedules can be unpredictable. Poirot's moustaches twitched, indeed. Yet this vial. He produced the small glass vial from Section 2. Bears your perfumeries embossed. Fleur-de-lis and contains traces of lavender oil on the stopper. Why was it in her workshop? Kent's jaw tightened. I send sample vials of the absinthe blend for her approval. She requested a trial batch. I cannot fathom why it remained in her personal space overnight. Poirot regarded him thoughtfully. Your ownership of the vial is indisputable. You had motive financial gain from a lucrative commission and opportunity to send a subtle threat, poison disguised as perfume. Kent laughed. A brittle sound. I would not harm her. I had no quarrel with Lady Pembroke. My relationship with Miss Delacroix was strained. Yes, but I dealt with her directly. He gestured to the bottles. My business depends on reputation. Murder would destroy me. Davis interjected. Your travel logs, however, indicate you were in Bath until 11:30. Lady Pembroke was killed round midnight. You have no alibi for the hour in between. Kent's fingers stilled. He met Poirot's gaze. I left early. The shipment required personal oversight. I slipped away unnoticed. Unnoticed, Poirot repeated. Yet you claim the workshop doors were locked at that hour by Mr. Parks. You must have had a key. Kent's expression darkened. I had access. She entrusted me with keys to her secondary atelier for emergencies, but I never used them after our sample delivery. Poirot pressed gently. Then how do you explain the bergamot-scented cigar match found at the scene identical to those served here? You smoke Cohiba Behike? Kent's eyes flickered. I cannot deny I enjoy a fine cigar, but to carry that match to London, absurd, under Poirot's patient yet unrelenting scrutiny. Oswald Kent's composure began to crumble. His shoulders slumped, and his voice lost strength. I admit, he said finally. I was there that night. I slipped into her workshop to collect the trial bottles after we spoke. I found her, already dead. I panicked and fled, leaving the vial behind. I realize how it looks unfortunate. But I swear I did not harm her. Poirot inclined his head. Your panic is understandable. Yet many would panic when discovering a body. But you had no reason to kill her. Yes, Kent's voice cracked. No, I admired her work. I would never harm her. Inspector Davis seized on the moment. But you panicked, monsieur. You had the means, the motive, and no solid alibi. We must consider you our prime suspect. Kent sagged into a chair, dark eyes haunted. Poirot watched him with an intensity that made Kent shiver. Inspector, Poirot said, standing. I believe we have found our culprit. Kent looked up, relief and fear mingling in his face. Thank you. I will cooperate fully. As Kent wept quietly, Davis moved to place him under formal arrest. Poirot stepped aside. Observing the scene, the station's gas lamps flickered through the window, casting Kent's trembling form in stark relief. It seemed an open and shut case. Kent had confessed to being on the premises, had no credible alibi, and had left physical evidence behind. Yet Poirot's mind worked beneath the surface. He noted the precision of Kent's answers, the dramatic timing of his confession exactly when flanked by two authority figures. He recalled the meticulously cut rose surgical, as if by a professional florist, not the unsteady hand of a panicked perfumer. He thought of the ruined violet petals scattered at the scene, a signature perhaps too perfectly placed. Inspector, Poirot said quietly. Stepping forward, Davis looked up expectantly. Consider the timing. Poirot began. Kent claims to have slipped away unnoticed at 11:30. The murder occurred at midnight. Why would the true killer risk returning after the body was discovered, planting evidence to implicate Kent? Davis frowned. It would take confidence or a plan. Exactly. And Kent has shown no such cunning. He is a blunt instrument, prone to panic. Our murderer, however, wove a tapestry of misdirection too artful for our perfumer. Davis paused, notebook in hand. So you think he's innocent after all? Poirot nodded. I believe this confession is our first falsely done attempt to close the case swiftly. But beware the ease of certainty. Inspector, the real culprit watches us from the shadows, smiling at our satisfaction. As Davis released Kent from the station house cell, Poirot placed a reassuring hand on the perfumer's shoulder. Kent looked up, confusion and gratitude mingling in his eyes. Rest assured. Poirot said softly, I will uncover the truth and clear your name. Outside the station, the cold wind swirled, lifting a stray lavender petal from the pavement and carrying it into the night. Poirot watched it dance away. A ghostly reminder that deception can drift on the smallest breeze and that the true killer would not be so easily revealed. With the first false lead laid bare, Poirot's little grey cells turned ever more sharply toward the genuine path, ready to unravel the deeper mysteries still concealed within Hawthorne Hall's fragrant halls. Chapter 7. The Psychological Gamut. That afternoon, Hercule Poirot assembled his small cast of suspects once more in the hushed elegance of Hawthorne Hall's workshop, where the memory of Lady Pembroke's last moments still clung to the velvet drapery and polished sofa. The gaslights flickered gently, casting long shadows that seemed to lean in, eager to hear each whispered confession and carefully measured denial. Poirot motioned for Inspector Davis to remain discreetly at the back before turning to face the four: Philip Parkes, Lord Ashcombe, Geoffrey Calhoun, and Iris Delacroix. Oswald Kent had been provisionally cleared, but Poirot had invited him only if further questions rose. Tonight, no. The focus lay on those who had remained in London. Poirot's expression was tranquil, almost benign. Msamus, he began in his soft Belgian accent. We have pursued physical evidence, and tonight we shall pursue the train of the mind. Each of you carries motives hidden behind courteous facades. Let us see whose resolve cracks under subtle pressure. He held up a slender ivory writing slip, the parchment bearing Kent's midnight appointment. "This note," he let it dangle before them, "is genuine. It reached Lady Pembroke, yet she never arrived in Bath. Instead, she met her fate here." He turned his keen gaze to Parks, Monsieur Parks. "You handled her correspondence. Tell us, why was this note not filed in her usual ledger of letters?" Parks swallowed, glancing nervously at Evelyn Cresswell, who stood just beyond the circle. I filed it incorrectly. I placed it with routine invoices." His voice trembled. "I thought it irrelevant to her floral orders." Poirot inclined his head. "A plausible mistake for a busy secretary. Yet you recall nothing of the courier's rival?" Parks shook his head, lips pressed tight. Next. Poirot advanced toward Lord Ishcombe, producing a single white rose from his coat pocket. "You admired Lady Pembroke's artistry. Why then did you send her no condolence telegram until after the police arrived?" Ashcombe's composure flickered. I felt grief too deeply to compose a telegram. I preferred to visit in person." He paused, cheeks flushing. "I feared my words inadequate." Poirot's moustaches quivered. "Perhaps, but consider, the telegram could have been typed in minutes. Preserving your reputation among society." Before news spread, Ashcombe's throat worked. He bowed his head. Poirot circled to Calhoun, who shifted in his seat. "Monsieur Calhoun, you erased an entire page of floral schematics last night. Did you not?" Calhoun's face went pale. "Yes, I redrew the design. It was faulty." He swallowed. "But nothing more. Faulty or inconvenient." Poirot's eyes were steel. "Your commission depended on those designs. If Lady Pembroke died before approving them, you would lose both prestige and fee." Calhoun opened his mouth, closed it, and finally whispered, "I never wished harm upon her." "Of course," Poirot said softly. "Yet your erasure remains unexplained." He paused to let the accusation settle. Finally, Poirot addressed Miss Delacroix. "Mademoiselle, you delayed informing Lady Pembroke of Mr. Kent's involvement. You concealed his identity from her." Delacroix's pale hands clutched the edge of her portfolio. I thought it would confuse matters, delay the merger until finances aligned." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Delay or obfuscation? You knew Kent had keys to her secondary alias. Did you not?" Delacroix looked away, voice taut. "He had my permission to access only after hours." Poirot nodded. "Yet he used those keys precisely at midnight." He let silence stretch between them. Across the room, Evelyn Cresswell watched each suspect with widening eyes. Poirot caught her gaze and beckoned her forward, holding a small vial of Lydia's scented oil. "Mademoiselle, you discovered your aunt's body, yet you brought no token of comfort, no flowers, no perfume, only startled grief. Why did you not place one of her own blossoms to honor her memory?" Evelyn's voice caught. I was distraught. I could not think of anything but losing her." Poirot folded his arms, and yet the murderer placed the white rose symbol of innocence and mockery. He let the implication hover. He stepped back to the center of the circle. "Now, I shall pose a question to each of you in turn. Answer honestly, and we shall move closer to the truth." He held up the rose and the vial. "Who among you secretary, patron, planner, perfumer had both the knowledge of her habits and the means to strike at exactly midnight, then plant these signs to mislead us?" Silence reigned, broken only by the ticking of a small carriage clock in the corner. Poirot turned sharply to Parks. "You would know when she retired each evening. You could ensure the workshop doors remained accessible." Parks shrank. I never thought of it that way." To Lord Ishcombe, Poirot continued, addressing the peer's rigid posture. "You could smoke a cigar to plant the match, yet you maintain you were in bed." Ashcombe's voice was barely audible. I would not lie about my movements, too. Mr. Calhoun, Poirot said, shifting his cane. You lingered in the workshop last night, alone. Opportunity was yours. Calhoun swallowed hard. I clean sketches, nothing more. And you? Mademoiselle Delacroix, Poirot concluded, you wield influence over Mr. Kent, distributed keys, and supplied the vial. You stand the only one with botanical expertise to cut the rose so precisely. Delacroix's lips trembled. I only delivered samples. Poirot surveyed them all. Tonight, I ask you to remain here while I review my deductions. No one leaves until we have unmasked the truth. He turned to Davis. Please see that these doors are secured. As the inspector moved to lock the workshop, Poirot's eyes glittered with anticipation. The suspects exchanged uneasy glances, alliances forming in furtive whispers, accusations flickering in node eyes. The game was set, each mind now prey to subtle provocation, each heart racing with the possibility of exposure. Poirot withdrew to a corner, steepling his fingers. Let us see who among them succumbs to the pressure and whose innocence endures the trial of the little grey cells. Outside, the wind rustled the branches of a lone yew tree, as though nature itself leaned closer to listen. Within the workshop, the true murderer felt the tightening noose of logic, even as they maintained the mask of composure. The psychological game had begun in earnest, and Poirot would emerge triumphant, for the human mind, under the right stimuli, yields its secrets as surely as ink on parchment. Chapter 8. A secondary mystery dawn broke over Belgrave Square with an uneasy stillness, as though the very air hesitated before carrying the day's news. Yet within the solemn walls of Hawthorne Hall, a new tempest was about to be unleashed. Word travelled swiftly among the household staff. Lady Pembroke's private safe, hidden behind a false panel in her workshop, had been found open, its contents disturbed. Most alarming of all, her final will, meticulously drafted just weeks earlier, had vanished. Inspector Davis and Hercule Poirot arrived together at the workshop, where Evelyn Cresswell stood by the safe, her face ashen. The concealed panel swung open, revealing nothing but a few scattered papers and an empty wooden box carved to hold the will. Poirot crouched to examine the floor beneath the panel, where a single scrap of parchment lay cold between the floor. Tiles. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, lifting the fragment with a gloved finger. He spread it flat. It bore the embossed watermark of Pembroke Hall stationery, yet only a few letters remained legible. Instu, Philip P. Evelyn's voice trembled. My aunt revised her will to leave the 8 rand, its entire contents, to me, not to her patron, Lord Ashcombe. The signed and witnessed document was secured here. Without it, the estate falls into legal limbo. Inspector Davis noted the fragment. This scrap suggests the thief tore the will rather than removed it whole. What if one intended to conceal a document, why leave any trace? Poirot stood and walked to the workshop table, where traces of yesterday's interview still lingered, violet petals, an overturned inkpot, and the slender ivory slip reading OK. He gestured to the table's edge. Observe, Inspector, the papers here have been ruffled, as though someone rifled through documents in haste. And yet only the will is missing. He returned to the safe and pressed a fingertip against the wooden box's inside surface. No sign of forced entry, only that the clandestine panel was released. The mechanism is known only to Lady Pembroke and a trusted few. Someone must have possessed intimate knowledge of its workings. Evelyn shivered. Only Mr. Parks and I knew of the safe's location. And Lord Ashcombe once glimpsed the secret compartment during a private consultation. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then our circle of suspects extends beyond the obvious. We must treat this as not merely theft, but an act designed to mislead us. The missing will shifts motive. Someone stands to gain by usury or by forcing inheritance. Elsewhere, he motioned toward the fireplace hearth, where a solitary matchstick identical to the cohiba behike fragment lay half buried in ash. Our smuggler returns to haunt the scene. He lifted it, and yet the fireplace was cold this morning, no embers remain. The thief did not pause to light a fire, but chose this spot for his misdirection. Inspector Davis bagged the match. So the same individual who planted the mug, the petals, and the vial may have crept back to remove the will. Poirot nodded, likely under cover of darkness. Between the false lead at Bath and our interviews, a calculated move to draw attention away from financial motives initially, then to reveal them only when suspicion of murder waned. Evelyn approached, holding the scrap. Monsieur Poirot, might we reconstruct the will from leftover fragments, or copies? My aunt kept no duplicates. Poirot examined her with compassionate eyes. We shall search every document, but I fear the original leaves no full trace. The thief intended precisely that, to leave no full record, only hints. He straightened. We must reassemble the puzzle. First, who benefits most from my dear lady's estate reverting to default inheritance? You, mademoiselle, as a niece yet you stood to inherit regardless, though perhaps less. Lord Ashcombe might claim reimbursement of debts against her estate. Mr. Parks, he managed the finances and might hope for a generous bequest. Mr. Calhoun and Miss Delacroix have no legal claim, but they stand to lose commission secured under her patronage. Davis frowned. This theft elevates Mr. Parks's motive if debts threaten his position. Seizing the will would grant him time, or force Evelyn to surrender assets to cover costs. Poirot rubbed his chin. True. Yet the removal demanded both knowledge of the safe and the will's value. Only Parks and Ashcombe truly understood that value. But let us not discount Geoffrey Calhoun. He had access to the workshop late at night and could obs. With the safe's secret panel, Evelyn clasped her hands. He erased sketches at midnight. He could have explored other uses for his clandestine hour. Poirot admired her insight. Indeed, Mademoiselle and Miss Delacroix, with her familiarity of keys and her career's roots, could have spirited the will away under cover of perfumery samples. He turned back to the scrap. We shall keep this fragment under careful guard. He placed it in an envelope, and we will examine every suspect's quarters for any trace of hidden papers. As Poirot and Davis prepared to depart for their next round of inspections, a footman entered, ushering them to a telephone in the adjacent hallway. Evelyn's eyes remained fixed on the open safe. On the line was Lady Montague, an old friend of the Pembrokes and a solicitor entrusted with initial drafts of the will. Her voice trembled with urgency. Monsieur Poirot, I regret to inform you that the signed original of Lady Pembroke's will kept in my locked vault in Mayfair has also been reported missing. Poirot exchanged a swift glance with Davis. 2 wills, both missing, one torn to bits. The other vanished completely. This transcends ordinary greed. It is an orchestration designed to sow chaos. Lady Montague continued, I am notifying the Yard, but you should be aware, anyone privy to both documents' existence could coordinate their removal. Poirot pressed his lips together. Thank you, madam. Your discretion thus far has been invaluable. He replaced the receiver. Mon Dieu, he said softly. Our thief is masterful, striking at both London and Bath to sever all certainty of inheritance. We face not a panicked opportunist, but a calculated adversary. Inspector Davis grimly closed his notebook. What next, Poirot? Poirot squared his shoulders. We intensify our inquiry. Tonight, we will search each suspect's lodgings and re-examine our evidence. And we shall set a trap by letting word of the secondary theft spread. We may provoke the true culprit into revealing themselves. Evelyn stepped forward. "Can I assist?" Poirot offered her a reassuring smile. "Your courage is admirable. Mademoiselle, pray remain here with Inspector Davis while I visit our suspects. Guard the workshop and ensure no one leaves." As he turned to go, Evelyn watched him depart, hope and fear mingling in her gaze. The missing will had deepened the mystery, but it also illuminated the murderer's confident sand, by extension. Their weaknesses. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with renewed energy, ready to chase every lead until the estate and the truth were restored. Thus, amidst scattered petals and torn parchment, the true culprit's next move awaited unseen, but destined to surface under the calm scrutiny of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 9. Hidden connections. Late that morning, Hercule Poirot summoned each suspect to the quiet library of Hawthorne Hall. Beneath the watchful gaze of ancestral portraits, he ranged them in a loose semicircle: Evelyn Cresswell, Philip Parks, Lord Ushcombe, Geoffrey Calhoun, and Iris Delacroix. The workshop's evidence remained sealed elsewhere, and the stolen will still eluded recovery. It was time, Poirot decided, to explore the web of relationships that bound these individuals to one another and to the victim. "I have been reflecting," Poirot began, voice calm, "on how each of you intersects, not only with Lady Pembroke, but with one another." He produced a large sheet of brown paper, upon which he sketched a simple diagram of names and lines. "Let us examine these hidden connections. Evelyn and Parks." Poirot drew a line between Evelyn and Parks. "Your relationship extends beyond niece and secretary. Mr. Parks has served your family for years." "Yes," Evelyn nodded, eyes downcast. "Yet I learn that you and he share more than duty. You played chess together each evening after Lady Pembroke retired." He raised an eyebrow at Parks. "Is this correct?" Parks cleared his throat. "Yes, monsieur. Lady Pembroke enjoyed chess, but her niece and I often played to keep vigil over her late sessions." He glanced at Evelyn, only as guardianship, never personal. Poirot tapped his cane. "And yet, in those games, you formed a bond. You knew her schedule intimately, and yours overlapped with the time of death." He folded his hands, curious that you, Monsieur Parks, could unlock the secret panel yet neglected to safeguard it. "Ushcombe and Calhoun next." Poirot drew a line between Lord Ushcombe and Geoffrey Calhoun. "You both attended the same university and collaborated on society events thereafter." He looked at Ushcombe, then Calhoun. "You once planned a gala together, did you not?" Calhoun nodded. 5 years ago, my first major event, Lord Ushcombe commissioned Lady Pembroke's blooms." Ushcombe smiled wryly. "Yes, and I recall." Mr. Calhoun's youthful zeal. His eyes darkened, until he overstepped, suggesting floral designs incongruent with my themes. He was dismissed from the committee. "And yet," Poirot continued, "he returned to your service later. When Lady Pembroke recommended him, he tapped Calhoun's sketchbook, an opportunity redeemed but perhaps not forgotten. Mr. Calhoun. You understood the patron's temper." Calhoun's jaw clenched. Delacroix and Kent. Poirot then connected Iris Delacroix and Oswald Kent. "Your perfumery and his distribution network are intertwined," he said, tapping the monogrammed vial. "You collaborate on rare essences." "Yes," Delacroix inclined her head. "Kent supplies raw materials I cannot procure. We have a business arrangement. An arrangement that Lady Pembroke threatened to disrupt by favouring another line of fragrances." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You both had motive to silence her and means to orchestrate the Bath meeting, leveraging his keys and your queer roots." Ushcombe and Delacroix's surprising line. Between Ushcombe and Delacroix, "Lord Ushcombe, you have financed several perfumery ventures." He glanced at Ushcombe. "Including a silent partnership in Maison de Lavanne's early days." Ushcombe frowned. Yes, I provided seed funding, but I withdrew when commissions lagged. Nevertheless, Poirot said, your fingerprints linger on Delacroix's accounts, suggesting clandestine influence. You might benefit if her partnership with Pembroke collapsed. Parks and Calhoun Poirot then linked Parks and Calhoun. You, Mr. Parks, approved Calhoun's invoices. Parks stiffened. Yes. I managed payments, and yet, Poirot observed, Calhoun's accounts show a series of adjusted fees always rounded generously. He looked at Calhoun. You repaid those overages to Parks personally. Did you not? Calhoun shifted. Only to cover his brother's debts. I thought it charitable, and yet it binds you, Monsieur Calhoun, to forestall scrutiny. Poirot's eyes sparkled. A secret alliance of convenience. Evelyn and Delacroix finally. Poirot connected Evelyn and Delacroix. Mademoiselle, you invited Miss Delacroix to dine at Hawthorne Hall once last month. Did you not? To discuss branching the 8-layer supply into perfumery. Evelyn nodded. I did, though I knew my, and disapproved. She met Delacroix's gaze. I hoped to expand our family business. Delacroix's lips tightened. Your invitation surprised me, but I saw opportunity until the cost of exclusivity soured our talks. Poirot stepped back. Notice how each of you possesses secret ties. He ran a finger along the lines. These clandestine bonds explain why the murderer exploited multiple locations: the workshop, the suite, the conservatory, and the perfumery. But only someone privy to all links could coordinate the staged clues. He paused, letting the map sink in. Our culprit needed intimate access to the safe, to the letters, to the keys, and to each suspect's movements. Who among you connects to all? All eyes darted among the group. Evelyn crossed arms. Parks swallowed. Ashcombe straightened. Calhoun tapped his foot. Delacroix's hand tightened on her portfolio. Poirot narrowed his gaze. Mr. Parks knows Evelyn, Calhoun, and Ashcombe. Miss Delacroix knows Kent, Evelyn, and Ashcombe. Lord Ashcombe knows all but Delacroix's secret dinners. Calhoun knows Parks, Ashcombe, and Evelyn. Oswald Kent knows Delacroix and Pembroke, but not Calhoun or Ashcombe personally. He looked round. Only one individual's network spans every line. A hush fell. Poirot pointed at Evelyn. Mademoiselle Cresswell, you invited Miss Delacroix, played chess with Parks, negotiated with Calhoun, and received consolation from Ashcombe. Your relationships touch each suspect. Evelyn's face drained of colour. Me. But I love my aunt. I would never. Poirot held up a hand. You loved her and you stood to lose everything if her will remained intact. You understood the safe's mechanism, had occasion to retrieve the wool fragments, and could plant the white rose during your midnight vigils. You orchestrated a secondary mystery to mask your initial act. Evelyn shook her head, voice trembling. No, I never meant harm. It was an accident. I only meant to scare her into changing her will back from me. Inspector Davis stepped forward, confusion and sympathy in his eyes. Mademoiselle. But Poirot raised his cane. Issachich, let her speak. Accident, you say. The surgical precision of the rose, the timing of the lavender trails, the false confession by Kent. You planned each knot in this web to ensnare me. And yet, you overlooked one crucial detail. He turned to Parks, Monsieur Parks. During your chess games, you taught Evelyn advanced strategies. She used those same tactics against us, provoking Kent into the confession, diverting suspicion through false leads. He looked back at Evelyn. You deployed your aunt's own tools of logic against her. Evelyn collapsed into a chair, trembling. She loved puzzles. I only wanted control of the 8-layer and her love. When she threatened to change her will, I confronted her. I meant to lock the safe, scare her. Then she fell. I panicked and staged everything. Poirot nodded solemnly. We, a tragic game of intellect turned deadly. Yet games always have a final move, and this one. Mademoiselle, you have played. To your last, as Evelyn covered her face, Inspector Davis placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Poirot surveyed the remaining suspects' relief, shock, and sorrow on their faces. The hidden connections had revealed the murder, but at the cost of a broken heart and shattered legacy. Poirot folded his hands. Let us reconstruct the sequence for the authorities and may truth, however painful, offer the only justice left. In the wake of revelation, the workshop's flowers, once symbols of beauty, stood silent, their petals recalling the tangled ties that led to tragedy. The game was over, and the little grey cells had triumphed once more, though the price of victory weighed heavily on every soul in Hawthorne Hall. Chapter 10. Poirot's secret clue late that evening. Hawthorne Hall lay silent beneath a veil of mist. The grand windows of the workshop glowed faintly from within, where Hercule Poirot sat alone at the workbench, studying the scattered remnants of the case. The missing wills, the surgical white rose, the lavender trails, and the false leads all clamoured for attention, yet one minutiae tugged insistently at his mind. He retrieved the scrap of will parchment from its envelope and placed it beside the vial of lavender oil and the tiny match fragment on the worn tabletop. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he reached for his magnifying glass. First, he examined the edges of the parchment scrap. The jagged tear matched precisely a gap on the opposite fragment held by Inspector Davison. Observation noted, but not yet sufficient. He set the fragment aside and picked up the vial stopper, its fleur-de-lis faintly etched across its surface, imperceptible under normal light. Lay a barely visible fingerprint ridge. Poirot adjusted the lamp's angle until the print gleamed silver beneath a dusting of lamp-black. Voila, Poirot murmured. He traced the ridge with his fingertip, then turned to his pocket notebook, where he had recorded the fingerprint impressions lifted from each suspect's belongings. He flipped to the page bearing the partial prints from Mr. Lacroix's perfume samples. Matching the ridge patterns revealed a perfect correspondence. Poirot gently tapped the table. Monsieur Parkes's prints were on the doorknob, Lord Ashcombe's on the ashtray, Mr. Calhoun's on the floor plan. This print belongs to the perfumer. A telling detail. He sealed the vial stopper in a small evidence bag and considered the match Fremenix. The match, charred at one end, bore the imprint of a distinctive maker's mark, an ornate deer unknown to common tobacconists. Poirot summoned Detective Doyle, who retrieved a reference book of Victorian-era match manufacturers. Flipping through entries, Doyle found the Derm and Rathbone monogram specialty matches produced only for high-end perfumery houses. Only 2 establishments had orders on record in London: Maison de Lavandie and another fragrant concern on Charlotte Street. Doyle jotted the note. Poirot nodded. Our match confirms Delacroix's involvement in the staging of the secondary crime scene, but her fingerprints on the vial stopper confirm something more. He closed his notebook and rose, standing beneath the tall windows. He looked out at the mist-shrouded courtyard. The significance of botanical expertise, he mused aloud, lies not merely in selecting flowers, but in understanding their anatomy. A florist's precision far beyond that of a perfumer was required to sever the rose's stem at that exact 45 degrees. Poirot returned to the workbench and laid out 3 roses, one freshly cut by Evelyn's hand earlier that day, one from Lord Ashcombe's personal gardener, and one from Calhoun's conservatory. He demonstrated the slicing angle with his penknife, noting the subtle differences in frond, cut, and sap residue. Only the rose clipped by a practiced florist, Lady Pembroke herself, matched the perfection seen on the murder rose. The cut had been made by someone trained in floral art. This hints that our culprit is closer to the Atelier than we believed. He tapped the ledger, still open at the Mr. Oswald Kent entry. Yet Kent is a perfumer, not a florist, nor does he possess the skill or the motive to emulate such artistry. Poirot gently closed the book. Therefore, the logical candidate is one accustomed to handling flowers, a person in daily contact with the blooms. He paused, letting the realization settle. But of course, he strode to the built-in cabinet and pressed a concealed latch, revealing the compartment where Lady Pembroke stored her most prized tools, a delicate floral knife, scraps, and trial vials. As Poirot opened a small drawer, he discovered an envelope he had overlooked, a letter in Lady Pembroke's hand, dated 2 days before her death. Folding it carefully, he read, "My dearest Stephen, I fear our business disagreements strain our bond. I entrust you with full rights to the atelier if you prove your understanding of its true purpose not as an inheritance, but as an art. Marguerite." Poirot's heart tightened at the tender signature. Folding the letter, he placed it with the other evidence. This note, meant to empower, now took on a darker hue. It revealed Lady Pembroke's intention to pass the atelier to her niece. Only upon Evelyn's demonstration of genuine floral skill and respect for the craft not from mere ownership, mon Dieu, Poirot whispered. He lit a candle and set the letter beside the floral knife. The juxtaposition spoke volumes, a test of artistry, a failed lesson, and a motive incubating in the heart of familial expectation. He settled back at the workbench and studied the patterns. Once more, the perfumer's print on the vial, the Derm and Rathbone match, the florist's precision of the rose cut, and now the aunt's letter to her niece. The true culprit had sought to shift suspicion onto others: Kent, Ashcombe, Calhoun, Park Sand, to exploit Delacroix's perfumer's credentials. But the central figure in the atelier was undeniably Evelyn, trained in its techniques, yet aching under the weight of her aunt's challenge. Yet Poirot restrained the final deduction. He folded his hands and closed his eyes, permitting the little grey cells to swirl the clues into clarity. "Not yet, mon ami," he murmured to the silent room. "First, we must observe their reactions when confronted with these subtleties." He extinguished the candle, plunging the workshop into half-light, gathering the vial, the match, the rose cut, and the letter. He placed them into a small wooden box. "Tomorrow," he said decisively, "we shall set the stage for the true reveal. But tonight, the secret clue lies in the perfumer's print and florist's precision, a duality of art and artifice, pointing at the heart of this mystery." With that, Poirot locked the drawer, extinguished the lamps, and departed the workshop. Outside, the mist curled round the hedges, as though nature itself awaited the next act. Within the walls of Hawthorne Hall, the little grey cells had discovered their secret clue, and the path to justice lay clearer than ever before. Chapter 11. Tensions Risonunde light filtered through the tall workshop windows, slanting across scattered petals and the silent witnesses of Lady Pembroke's fine lovers. Hercule Poirot stood behind the central workbench, Inspector Davis at his side, as each suspect filed back into the room. Philip Parkes, Lord Ashcombe, Geoffrey Calhoun, Iris Delacroix, and Evelyn Cresswell. None smiled, and the hush that greeted them crackled with unspoken anxieties. Poirot folded his hands. "Msamus, today we have uncovered evidence that narrows our field considerably." He motioned to a small easel bearing a black and white photograph of the rose stem, cut at 45 degrees, alongside an enlarged image of the faint fingerprint on the vial stopper. "These clues," he said evenly, "are not random. They speak to skill and intent." As he spoke, Parkes shifted uncomfortably. His gaze darted first to the rose image, then to Evelyn, whose whereupon brow betrayed her unease. Poirot continued, "Yet a single piece is missing from our demonstration, the letter from Lady Pembroke to her niece." He lifted the folded note. A letter that set a test of artistry, and a motive born of unspoken resentment. He let the words linger before tucking the parchment back. Silence held for a heartbeat, then the first crack appeared. Geoffrey Calhoun stepped forward, voice tremulous with frustration. "Monsieur Poirot, with respect, you present these clues as if we share equal knowledge. But you know that only one among us could wield them with such precision." He glanced sharply at Delacroix. "The perfumer's print is hers, yet the rose-cut belongs to a florist. How does that serve your theory?" Delacroix's eyes flashed. "Iris Delacroix is a perfumer. Yes, but I have handled flowers all my life. My family owned an English country garden. I would recognize a rose's anatomy as well as any florist." She turned to Evelyn. "And you, Mademoiselle Cresswell, learnt all you know at your aunt's side. Do not feign ignorance of floral technique." Evelyn's cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth to protest, but Parks interjected, stepping between them. "Enough. This bickering is precisely what our culprit intended, to turn us on one another and divert attention." He fixed Delacroix with a steady stare. "Miss Delacroix, you confessed to concealing Mr. Kent's career. Yet you speak as though you understand our positions intimately." Delacroix's lip curled. "I do understand them, Mr. Parks, because I see how each of you has benefited or suffered from Lady Pembroke's enterprise." Lord Ashcombe cleared his throat. Voice smooth but tense. "Let us not forget why we are here. A woman has been murdered, will stolen, and reputations tarnished. We must not degrade ourselves with petty accusations." He adjusted his cufflinks. "If the perfumer's print is genuine, then someone planted it deliberately. But why implicate one of Lady Pembroke's oldest collaborators?" Poirot inclined his head. "Because, mon ami, the game is not about who had the weakest alibi, but who can weave the most convincing narrative. Each of you could play your part." He paused, surveying their faces. "Notice how your alliances shift. Calhoun accusing Delacroix, Delacroix challenging Evelyn, Parks pleading for a reason. The true murderer watches these tensions unfold with satisfaction." Calhoun folded his arms. "And what of you, Poirot? You presume to sit above us, orchestrating this theatre. Perhaps the real culprit is the one who arranged this display." Davis stepped between Poirot and Calhoun. "Calhoun, temper yourself. Monsieur Poirot has preserved evidence nobody else noticed." Calhoun's jaw clenched, but he fell silent. Delacroix, recovering her composure, cleared her throat. "Let us speak plainly. If my print on the vial implicates me, then someone wanted to frame me. But why would they choose the perfumery? Because they know I was at odds with Lady Pembroke over botanical sourcing." She glanced at Evelyn, then turned to Ashcombe. "Or perhaps it serves to draw your patronage away, Lord Ashcombe." "You have been known to meddle in business affairs," Ashcombe bristled. "Madam, I have done nothing but support both Lady Pembroke and your enterprise. If you wish to accuse me, present proof." Delacroix's lips pressed then. She swung her gaze to Parks. "And you, Monsieur Parks, guardian of both letter and ledger. You misplaced the Bath note. You held the keys, and you control the finances. Who gained from the stolen will? You, perhaps." Parks's face darkened. He glared at Lord Ashcombe. "Do not pretend innocence. Your debts loom large in her accounts. You had every reason to silence Lady Pembroke's challenges." He jabbed a finger at Ashcombe's chest. "And you, Caleb, excuse me. Calhoun, your losses, this contract would have cost you dearly." Calhoun recoiled as though struck. Such duplicity. "I repaid Parks's debts myself to spare Lady Pembroke the embarrassment." Delacroix interjected, voice ice cold. Then explain the unsigned testing slip found among your sketches, the one listing Bath's midnight time. You planted that to direct the investigation away from your own late-night visits. Calhoun's face drained. I meant only to remind her of our meeting. That sketch was genuine under the pressure. Lord Erskine looked restless. He turned to Evelyn. Mademoiselle, you claim filial devotion, yet you invited Miss Delacroix behind your aunt's back and insisted on business changes. You, too, had motive and skill, as you practiced in the Atelier. He folded his arms. Why would she trust you with the Atelier's future if you disrespected her vision? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I never intended to betray her. I only wanted recognition. Ashcombe's voice softened. Recognition is not ownership, Evelyn's. Sob caught in her throat as she sank to a workbench stool. Poirot held up a hand. Sufficient. His voice was calm yet carried authority that silenced further outbursts. You see how easily resentments ignite. Our murder relied upon these tensions to obscure the true motive one concealed deeper than commerce or pride. He glanced at each in turn. Continue to mistrust one another if you wish. But know this, the next drop of discord will bring us closer to the one who orchestrated this drama. As the suspects withdrew, some supporting one another, others seething in silence, Poirot turned to Inspector Davis. Tensions rise. Monomy. But true resolve reveals character. Watch how they move, how they speak. The guilty will attempt one final stratagem to escape scrutiny. Davis nodded, closing his notebook, and we will be ready. Poirot surveyed the now empty workshop. Its scattered petals and overturned shares the aftermath of emotional upheaval, the human heart. He mused, adjusts poorly to suspicion. Yet in these frayed nerves lie the clues we seek tomorrow. We shall probe their vulnerabilities further on, see whose composure finally breaks. With that, he extinguished the lamplight, leaving the workshop in gentle half-shadow, as though breathing after the storm of accusation outside. Alone, the violin in a distant salon drifted a melancholy tune, an echo of rising tension soon to be resolved by the keen intellect of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 12. The confrontation-lit afternoon light slanted through the workshop windows as Hercule Poirot ranged the suspects once more in the family. A semicircle. Philip Parkes near the workbench. Lord Erskine by the folding screen. Geoffrey Calhoun beside the overturned sketch table. Iris Delacroix near the perfume vials, and Evelyn Cresswell, pale and tense, closest to the hidden safe. Inspector Davis stood unobtrusively at the back. Poirot held in his hand the slender floral knife he had retrieved, its razor edge glinting. Msamis, Poirot began, his voice calm yet electric in its precision. Today we confront the pivotal question: who among you not only had motive, means, and opportunity, but also the audacity to manipulate every clue to their advantage? He placed the knife on the bench and spread before them three items: the surgical white rose stem, the perfume vial with its perfumer's print, and the scrap of wool parchment bearing the faint watermark. He tapped the rose stem. This, cut exactly 45 degrees, required a practiced hand in floral art. He paused, then pointed to the vial. This fingerprint belongs not to a casual visitor, but to someone deeply familiar with perfumed essences. Finally, he held up the parchment, and this note reveals Lady Pembroke's true intention: to bequeath her Atelier only to one who comprehends its art, not its inheritance. He folded his fingers thoughtfully. I have observed your interactions, your alliances, and your misdirections. Now, I offer each of you a moment to explain how you reconcile these facts with your own conduct. Poirot advanced first toward Evelyn, voice gentle. Mademoiselle Cresswell, you alone share the florist's skill to execute such a cut, yet you claim ignorance of the knife's use on that fatal rose. How do you account for its perfection? Evelyn swallowed. lips trembling. I never touched her tools after her death. I only observed them. Her gaze flicked to the rose and away again. Poirot's moustaches twitched. Observe the edge where the sap hardened into a vein. Amber filigree detail seen only by the one who cut and immediately cleaned the blade. Evelyn's breath hitched. She glanced at the knife, then at the vial. Turning smoothly, Poirot approached Delacroix. Mademoiselle Delacroix, your print on the vial suggests you handled it directly. Yet you professed to send samples only by courier. How did this vial come to rest upon the workshop desk? Delacroix's shoulders stiffened. I supplied the sample myself when the courier failed. I left it on the desk and departed immediately. Her eyes flickered toward Evelyn, then back at Poirot. Lips pressed then. Indeed, Poirot's tone held a question mark. And yet, residues of bergamot on the stopper match the blend you declared exclusive to Bath House. Only someone who had tested the blend and returned it at the precise moment of the crime could have left it there and cleaned the vial afterwards. Delacroix's hand shook as she adjusted her coat. Poirot moved to the center of the room, steepling his fingers. Now, gentlemen, you have witnessed these facts laid bare. He addressed Calhoun. Mr. Calhoun, you erased your sketches to conceal that floor plan of Bath convenient to implicate Mr. Kent, yet you professed ignorance of the perfume and the rose. Why did you linger in the workshop at midnight, under the guise of improving your designs? Calhoun's jaw clenched. He opened his mouth, then closed it, voice quavering. I needed the silence to think. I did not wish to disturb Lady Pembroke and certainly not harm her. He bit his lip, eyes darting to Evelyn and back. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Silence is a luxury. Mr. Calhoun, yet our murderer thrives. In the hush of midnight, you had access to the safe panel and the ledger. But one who truly loved Lady Pembroke would not exploit her generosity for personal gain. He turned then to Parkes. Monsieur Parkes, your fingerprints on the doorknob explained as oversight suggest you moved the knob after the crime. You knew exactly where the petals lay, and carried that scrap of paper to delay discovery of the will. Parkes shook his head. I only wanted to protect Mademoiselle Cresswell. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A noble goal, perhaps, but misapplied. And you, Lord Erskine. You smoked to calm your nerves, but the match you discarded bears the monogram of the perfumery, linking you indirectly to Mr. Lacroix's domain. You, too, had your reasons. Ashcombe's composure wavered. I regret everything that has transpired. But guilt I do not bear. Poirot stepped back into the center, gaze sweeping the 5 faces. Now, one final question. Who among you can name the precise variety of rose found at the scene? No one spoke. Poirot nodded to Evelyn. At the moment of the crime, he continued. Our murderer plucked not a common hybrid tea, but the rare Margaret's Hope, cultivated exclusively by Lady Pembroke to honor her mother. This variety blooms only in her greenhouse. Who could recognize it instantly and select it as a signature? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then blurted. It was my aunt's favorite. She taught me its meaning. I choose that rose because she taught me, and I knew she would understand why it was laid upon her lap. A hush fell. Evelyn covered her face with her hands, sobs muffled. The others stared in shock. Poirot advanced. Voice calm yet firm. There is the slip. Knowledge only imparted in private tutelage, knowledge not common to a perfumer or a patron, nor to the secretary, nor learned by watching Mr. Calhoun's designs. This tells us our murderer is the one closest to Lady Pembroke's heart. Evelyn sank to her knees, trembling. I didn't mean. I only asked her to teach me. I never meant to hurt her. Her confession broke through the tension like a storm cracking the horizon. Inspector Davis moved forward to support her. But Poirot raised a hand. He turned to the group. Voice measured. "You have witnessed the heart of the mystery bear. Mademoiselle Cresswell has provided the crucial slip her intimate knowledge revealing the final piece." He faced Evelyn gently. "Your grief is understood, but justice must follow. You shall have your day to explain. But for now, know that the truth, once hidden, cannot remain so forever." As Evelyn wept softly, the others stood in shocked silence, some in mourning, others in grim reflection. Poirot's little grey cells had triumphed again. Through a masterful confrontation, he had drawn forth the slip of knowledge that only the true culprit could possess. The workshop, with its scattered petals and silent tools, seemed to exhale. In relief, the heavy burden of deception lifted at last, and though the path to justice would require further steps, the pivotal confrontation had illuminated the culprit's hand at last. With that, Poirot signalled for Inspector Davis to secure the room. The confrontation was complete, and only the final acts remained to bring this chapter of tragedy to its close. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape. A tense stillness had settled over Hawthorne Hall in the pre-dawn hours, as though the very walls held their breath. The lamps in the corridors flickered out one by one, leaving only pale moonlight to guide the household staff as they moved about in hushed urgency. Inspector Davis and Hercule Poirot had retired early, exhausted by the day's revelations, but neither slept soundly. A nagging sense of unfinished business lingered between them. Shortly before 4 o'clock, a sharp knock echoed through the hallway outside Evelyn Cresswell's room. The constable on duty reported her door ajar, the bed empty, the coverlet in disarray. Poirot and Davis hurried to the chamber and found a single torn scrap of parchment fluttering to the floor in the morning's first breeze. Evelyn had fled. Poirot's steady voice cut through the constable's alarm. "She has not left the estate grounds. Note the absence of footprints in the gravel. She moved through the greenhouse." Davis nodded and led the way, lantern in hand, as Poirot followed, cane tapping softly against the flagstones. In the great glass house, dew-fresh petals glistened like jewels beneath the lantern's glow. Exotic blooms bent under the weight of night air, their heady scents mingling in confounding harmony. At the far end, beside a wrought-iron brazier, stood Evelyn, her trembling form illuminated by flickering embers. In one hand she held Lady Pembroke's final letter, in the other the scraps of her will. "Evelyn," Poirot called gently, stepping forward with raised palms. "Do not destroy what remains." She spun, eyes wild with desperation. "He told me I had to prove myself, but I failed. If they see that letter, they will know the pain I could not bear." Her voice cracked as she pressed the letter to her chest. "I cannot face them, cannot live with their reproach." Poirot approached slowly, crouching to scoop the fragile fragments from the brazier's edge. "Your fear is understandable, but true justice is not undone by flames. The letter your aunt entrusted to you reveals her hopes, not your guilt." He produced the ivory slip from his coat pocket, the midnight appointment note that had misled them all, and held it out. "You see how deceit blinds even the keenest eye. Now, let the truth lighten your burden." Evelyn's knees buckled, and she sank beside the brazier. "I tried to burn the scraps, to erase the proof of my betrayal, but I could not bear to watch it burn." She trembled, tears glistening in the lantern light. I thought if I destroyed every clue, I might escape condemnation." Inspector Davis emerged behind Poirot, his expression grave but compassionate. "Come, Miss Cresswell, no one seeks your ruin beyond justice. We must return to the workshop and face the consequences together." Evelyn hesitated, staring into the dying embers. At last she rose, clutching the letter and the scattered fragments. Poirot guided her to the exit. where the first pale glow of dawn began to seep through the glass panes. The household staff watched silently as she passed, their earlier suspicion replaced by pity. Back in the workshop, Poirot laid the evidence on the workbench: the intact letter, the wool fragments, the ivory slip, and the floral knife. The suspect's box, Ashcombe, Calhoun, and Delacroix stood in apprehensive silence, each aware that the case's final turn was at hand. Poirot addressed them all, voice firm but not unkind. Last night, Miss Cresswell attempted to destroy the very documents that revealed the truth of Lady Pembroke's intentions and her own culpability, yet she could not carry out that final act in her remorse. She preserved the evidence that confirms her actions. He motioned to the fragments. These scraps, though torn, fit together as surely as the pieces of this mystery. And this letter, he held it aloft, speaks of art, not inheritance, a test of skill and spirit. He turned to Evelyn, who stood pale and breathless. "Mademoiselle, you may speak." With a steadying breath, Evelyn stepped forward. "I love my aunt more than I knew how to show. When she threatened to test my devotion by withholding her Idlia, I confronted her in the workshop. I did not mean to kill her, I only wanted her to see that I deserved her love." Her voice faltered. She tried to calm me, but I blocked her path. She stumbled, struck her head, and lay still. I panicked and staged everything back: the vial, the rose. I thought I could control the story, but I was so afraid of failing her. As she spoke, each listener felt the weight of tragedy. Parks's eyes misted with regret. Ashcombe pressed his lips in sorrow. Calhoun bowed his head, and Delacroix clasped her hands, troubled sympathy softening her features. Inspector Davis stepped forward to escort Evelyn. Waiting for the authorities, Poirot watched the scene unfold. The morning light strengthening behind them. The final desperate escape had failed, but it had also revealed the depth of human frailty and love's darker shadows. Poirot's little grey cells had guided them through misdirection and mounting tensions. To this moment of clarity, he turned to the assembled group. "Our task now is to allow the law to take its course, secure in the knowledge that the truth, once sought, cannot remain hidden." With that, the household breathed as one a staggered exhale of relief and sorrow's Hawthorne Hall's gilded age of secrets gave way to the sober dawn of justice. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into place late that afternoon. The workshop of Hawthorne Hall thrummed with subdued activity. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing above the workbench where evidence lay meticulously ranged. Inspector Davis consulted his notebook while Poirot stood before the gathered fragments of the case: the razor-cut rose, the perfume vial, the writing slip, the torn wool parchment, and the letter from Lady Pembroke. Though the central culprit had confessed and been taken into custody, Poirot knew the true artistry of the crime remained incomplete until every last detail found its place. Poirot tapped the rose stem with his cane, drawing Davis's attention. "Observe once more, mon ami, how the cut's axis aligns not only with floral technique, but with the orientation of these workshop tiles. The murderer chose the blade angle to mirror the compass rose painted on the floor at the threshold, an echo, perhaps, of seeking direction." He gently lifted the rose and set it aside, exhaling softly. The link between artifice and geometry is seldom accidental. Davis looked up, brow furrowed. "But why leave such an overt clue?" "It seems almost theatrical, because," Poirot said, stroking his mustaches, a mind fueled by both love and fear wishes to imprint significance upon every object. Yet in doing so, the perpetrator overlooked a subtler mark: the residue of Lady Pembroke's rare Margaret's hope essence upon the knife handle. Detectable only by the most sensitive olfactory instruments. With a measured gesture, Poirot produced a small glass phial in which rested aromatic cotton wool. "Here," he said, "is the essence itself, gathered from residual traces on the blade. Our chemist confirmed that this particular blend bergamot tinted with peony undertones was unique to Lady Pembroke's private greenhouse and was never sold commercially. Only one person handled the blend after her death." He smiled gently, "and that was the person whose grief drove every misdirection." He set the phial before Inspector Davis and turned to the assembled staff now, including Lord Ashcombe, Geoffrey Calhoun, Iris Delacroix, and Philip Parks, each summoned back into the workshop. Evelyn Cresswell, pale but composed, stood at their side, accompanied by a uniformed constable. Poirot raised his hand for silence. "Mesdames et messieurs, what remains is to demonstrate how each clue converged upon our perpetrator's tortured heart." He motioned to a chalkboard he had requisitioned and drew for concentric circles. At the center lies the motive, fear of abandonment, and the desire to prove worthiness of her aunt's legacy. Surrounding that is opportunity midnight access, keyhole to status, intimacy with the workshop. He indicated a second circle. Next means the surgical knife, the perfume vial, the false lead to Bath, and finally, the outer ring represents consequence, the torn will, the staged confession, and the wrongful suspicion of others. He stepped back, or rings overlap only at one locus. Evelyn Cresswell. None among you shares all these attributes in equal measure. He tapped the center of the diagram. Here. Lord Ashcombe cleared his throat, voice respectful. "You have demonstrated, Monsieur Poirot, that only Evelyn possessed both the floristry skill and the access to the phial, yet her confession spoke of accident, not intent." "True," Poirot replied. "But accident or not, the deliberate staging of Bath, the precise rose placement, and the removal of wills require conscious design. And yet one last piece remained obscured until now." He turned to Inspector Davis and nodded. Davis retrieved a small envelope marked that morning from the solicitor in Mayfair. This arrived. Davis explained, with a fragment of vellum, bearing the solicitor's embossed seal, the missing corner of the Bath railway slip, torn to conceal the messenger's identity. Poirot opened the envelope and removed the vellum. Holding it up to the light, he pointed to the faint watermark, the emblem of Pembroke Hall itself. Note: the messenger was not perfumed, nor a Bath courier, but the solicitor's clerk summoned by Evelyn under pretense of legal urgency. His voice grew soft. Evelyn alone had motive to involve the solicitor, to ensure that multiple wills, one in Mayfair and one in the workshop, would vanish simultaneously, forcing inheritance. To revert to her by default, he placed the vellum next to the other fragments. Thus, the final piece, the deliberately orchestrated loss of all testamentary documents, a desperate gambit, born of conviction that without the wills, her aunt could not deny her the Adlia, and so, though driven by love, she became the architect of her aunt's fate. Evelyn drew in a trembling breath, but held her head high. Poirot inclined his head in acknowledgment. "Your sorrow is evident, mademoiselle, and though the law must be served, the truth of your devotion shines through every misstep." He turned to the others. "Let this lesson remain, that when passion and fear collide, hearts may craft tragedies as precise as any artisan's masterpiece. We have laid the final piece into place and may now proceed to the conclusion of this sad tale." The room fell into solemn silence, broken only by the soft rustle of petals outside the window. Poirot circled the workbench, gently gathering each item. "Tomorrow I shall gather you once more for the grand reveal, where the full narrative shall be presented to the authorities and our dear Evelyn's confession formalized. Until then, let the Atelier stand undisturbed, a testament to both creation and ruin." As he departed, Poirot cast one last glance at the chalkboard diagram, a perfect blueprint of human frailty, illuminated by the clarity of deduction in the quiet of Hawthorne Hall's workshop. The final piece had at last fallen into place, and the path to justice lay unbroken before them. Chapter 15. The final gathering morning sun streamed through Hawthorne Hall's workshop windows, casting long beams across the polished wood and scattered petals that bore witness to every twist of this tragic affair. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the central workbench, bristling with calm authority. Round him, the 5 remaining suspects: Philip Parkes, Lord Ushcombe, Geoffrey Calhoun, Iris Delacroix, and Evelyn Cresswell took their places in a semicircle, each positioned near the evidence that had shaped their fates: the perfume vial, the surgical rose stem, the torn wool fragments, the ivory writing slip, and the chalkboard diagram. Inspector Davis, notebook in hand, lingered at the back, ready to record the final statements. A hush fell over the room as the assembled group awaited Poirot's first words. Even the distant hum of servants and the faint rustle of leaves in the courtyard seemed to pause, as if the world itself recognized the gravity of this moment. "Monsieur and mesdames," Poirot began, voice measured, "today we convene one last time before the grand reveal of events that befell Lady Pembroke and her Idlia. Each of you has contributed to the tapestry of this investigation, and each clue you encountered has led us inexorably to the heart of the matter. But it is fitting that before we unveil the full truth, we gather here to witness the culmination of our collective journey." He gestured to the workbench, where each piece of evidence stood in solemn clarity. "Observe these items: the rose, cut at 45 degrees, the vial, bearing a lone perfumer's print, the slip, inscribed with a midnight meeting, the torn parchment of the will, and the scrap of vellum from Mayfair. Alone, they are fragments. Together, they form the narrative of love, fear, and despair." A flicker of tension passed over the faces before him. Lord Ushcombe's posture remained dignified yet restrained. Calhoun's jaw worked with unspoken frustration. Delacroix's eyes glistened with regret. Parkes's shoulders slumped under the weight of his own errors, and Evelyn's gaze remained fixed on the scattered petals at her feet. Poirot's dark eyes swept the semicircle. "I invited you here so that each of you might see how your own stories intersect with the evidence. For you, Mr. Parkes, the misplacement of keys and the misplaced letter fragments reveal opportunity born of devotion. Lord Ushcombe, your generosity and grief sought sympathy, but also framed suspicion. Mr. Calhoun, your midnight designs and erased sketches guided us toward false leads. Mademoiselle Delacroix, your vial and match stoked the fires of misdirection. And you, Mademoiselle Cresswell, born of artistry and love, found yourself trapped between your heart's desire and the cold logic of the law." He paused, allowing each person to absorb the reflection. "In a few moments, I shall detail the precise sequence of events that led to Lady Pembroke's death, the theft of her wills, and the staging of our suspects. But before that, I offer you one final opportunity to speak, to express any lingering truths, regrets, or remorse that may ease the burden upon your conscience." An uneasy silence followed. Then Parkes cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirot, I must apologize for so carelessly compromising vital evidence. My loyalty to Evelyn and to her inheritance blinded me to the gravity of my actions. Though I did not wish harm, I contributed to the confusion, and for that I am truly sorry." Lord Ushcombe bowed his head. "I have also learned a painful lesson. Generosity can be misconstrued as guilt, and grief as motive. I hope my support of Margaret's dreams will not be marred by my own missteps in this sad affair." Geoffrey Calhoun took a steadying breath. "I brought suspicion upon myself by attempting to control the narrative of my designs. In doing so, I overlooked the real tragedy unfolding under our noses. I regret my part in diverting attention from the truth. Iris Delacroix's voice wavered as she spoke. I believed I was protecting my reputation when I concealed Mr. Kent's involvement and left that vial. I see now how my fear of professional loss deepened the wounds of this case. I beg forgiveness from all. Finally, Evelyn Cresswell rose. Slowly, tears glistening on her cheeks, she faced each suspect in turn before addressing Poirot. I have no defense for what I did. I loved my aunt and feared that without her Atelier I would have nothing to show for my devotion. My desperation, my failure to follow her teachings of art over inheritance led me to a moment of irrever. Civil mistake. I am ready to accept whatever. Judgment is rendered. Poirot nodded, his expression compassionate yet unbroken by emotion. Thank you all. Your honesty now clears the path for a full and fair accounting. He turned to Inspector Davis. Mon ami, please retrieve the official record from the envelope. Davis walked to a side cabinet and pulled out a sealed folder bearing the yard's insignia. Returning, he handed the folder to Poirot, who opened it to reveal typed statements, documents, and witness accounts that had been compiled overnight. Poirot read aloud, summarizing each pivotal fact. The time of death established at shortly after midnight. The unauthorized entry through the workshop's secret panel. The discovery of Lady Pembroke's body with the white rose placed as a mockery of innocence. The removal of 2 wills to force default inheritance. The staged bath appointment. The false confession of Mr. Kent. And finally, Evelyn's confrontation and panicked staging before the truth emerged. As he spoke, the suspects listened in respectful silence, each fact reinforcing the mosaic of tragedy and human frailty. When Poirot reached the moment of Evelyn's flight to the greenhouse and her subsequent expression of remorse, he closed the folder and regarded her with solemn kindness. Thus, the final piece of the puzzle aligns. Fear of unworthiness overcame filial love, leading to a chain of events that no single act could contain, and yet, through tragedy, we have seen true service, and for that we owe some gratitude. Amidst the sorrow, he folded the folder and stepped back. Now, with all gathered here, I present my formal resolution of this mystery. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Outside, a gentle breeze stirred through the workshop, carrying the faint scent of Margaret's hope roses and promising renewal beyond the pain. Poirot's little grey cells had guided them through misdirection, tension, and confession to this final gathering. Ahead lay the reveal, the confession recorded, and justice assured. But in this quiet workshop, where art and sorrow had intertwined, each soul had spoken and prepared to face what must come next with dignity, remorse, and the faintest glimmer of hope that, even in darkness, truth may bloom anew. Chapter 16. The reveal. Hawthorne Hall's workshop fell into a profound stillness as Hercule Poirot stood before the circle of witnesses. The morning sun now high enough to cast golden shafts over the evidence-strewn workbench. The anticipation in the air was palpable. He had gathered them here not merely to recount the facts, but to lay bare the motives and the method by which tragedy had unfolded. Inspector Davis waited respectfully behind, pen poised. The 5 faces before Poirot: Evelyn Cresswell, Philip Parkes, Lord Erskine, Geoffrey Calhoun, and Iris Delacroix were drawn taut with uncertainty, having already voiced their regrets. Now they awaited the final revelation. Poirot cleared his throat softly. Mzamas, we have reached the moment when the threads of this tapestry must be pulled taut, until each knot reveals its purpose. That purpose began with love and ended in despair. Let us begin at the hour of midnight. He raised the ivory writing slip bearing the distorted appointment note. This false meeting with Mr. Oswald Kent was the first of many finds. It diverted suspicion, encouraged a confession, and led us to believe that a perfumer might have been the murderer. Yet the flower you placed upon the body, Margaret's hope, reveals a closer bond, one of shared artistry and familial trust. His gaze settled on Evelyn. You alone knew the secret variety, for your aunt taught you its name and its meaning, enduring fidelity tempered by sorrow. You chose that rose to communicate a message only she would understand, a plea for her love. An offering of innocence, Evelyn's breath caught, her pale face trembling. Poirot continued, and yet the cut itself, executed with such precision, spoke not merely of emotion, but of practiced skill. This was no impulsive act of passion, but the hand of one trained under Lady Pembroke's own tutelage. He placed the rose aside and lifted the floral knife. This instrument, kept among her most treasured tools, was used twice, first to remove the wool from its binding, then to sever the stem. The residue of Margaret's hope essence clings to its handle, an imprint so slight that only specialized analysis could reveal it. It testifies that the hand which wielded this knife was both artist and betrayer. Poirot paused, watching Evelyn's shoulders quake. Then he turned to Delacroix. Iris, your perfume vial, embossed with your employer's fleur-de-lis, was found on the desk. You claimed to have left it there in error, yet the stopper bears your fingerprint and traces of bergamot from the workshop's hidden greenhouse blend and aroma not sold beyond these walls. Delacroix lowered her eyes, silent. Poirot moved on. Your involvement set the stage for initial suspicion, drawing attention toward Bath. But the true culprit used this misdirection to conceal her own deeds. He then addressed Calhoun. Geoffrey, your erased sketches and that midnight floor plan sought to implicate Mr. Kent and Lord Ashcombe alike. You lingered under cover of darkness. Your mind consumed by event layouts, yet you remained oblivious to the larger design unfolding in your very midst. Calhoun's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Poirot's gaze swept to Ashcombe. Lord Ashcombe, your cigar match, bearing perfumed origins, implicated you in the staging, yet you smoked, only to calm your grief, unaware that your habit would serve as another false lead. The peer's face was solemn, his mourning genuine. Finally, Poirot faced Pox. Fill up. You held the keys to the secret panel and the ledger. You misplaced the Bath note. You handled the doorknob and the correspondence. Your devotion to Evelyn guided your choices, yet you did not unmask the murderer, for you believed her innocence and sought to protect her at every turn. He folded the writing slip and set it on the bench. Only one individual possessed the confluence of floristry skill, intimate knowledge of the workshop's secrets, emotional motive, and capacity for strategic misdirection. That individual stood at the heart of every clue, yet trusted in her solitude to conceal her deed. Mademoiselle Cresswell, you engineered this tragedy. Evelyn's tear-filled eyes rose to meet Poirot's. She opened her mouth, voice low and choked. Monsieur Poirot, Poirot raised a calm hand. Allow me to complete the narrative. At midnight, you unlocked the secret panel, retrieved the will, and met your aunt in the workshop. You confronted her over her conditional intentions. Words turned heated. In a moment of anger and despair, you raised the knife. She slipped, struck her head, and fell. Shocked by the irrevocable outcome, you enacted your plan. You placed the rose, planted the vial, lit no fire, yet let the match and the dusted lavender seduce suspicion elsewhere. You then tore the will into fragments, scattering them to delay matters, and arranged the false Bath note to implicate another. He paused, allowing the weight of each accusation to settle. Evelyn's lip trembled, tears streaming down her cheeks. Poirot continued gently. In the hours that followed, you consulted confessions, orchestrated false leads, and even attempted to destroy the evidence you alone understood. Yet the little grey cells of justice prevailed, revealing the perfumer's print, the floral residue. and the unique rose variety. Each clue pointed to you, until your confession in the greenhouse confirmed the truth. Inspector Davis stepped forward and placed a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn Cresswell. You are under arrest for the death of Lady Pembroke and the theft of her testamentary documents. Evelyn's head bowed, her sobs muffled. Poirot folded his hands. Let no one say this was a simple crime of inheritance. It was a tragedy born of love, pride, and despair. May our dear lady rest in peace, and may this workshop, once the scene of sorrow, again become a sanctuary of beauty and renewal. The assembly stood in respectful silence as Davis moved to lead Evelyn away. Poirot lingered by the workbench, gazing at the petals and the knife. Then, turning slowly to the remaining four, he offered a final nod. You, who survived suspicion, may now resume your lives with a clearer conscience. Let this affair remind you that truth, like these flowers, will always bloom again even after the harshest winter. As the heavy workshop door closed on Evelyn and the constable, the morning light filled the room. In that luminous hush, Poirot's little grey cells rested, their duty fulfilled at last. The reveal was complete, and the elegant machinery of justice, guided by human compassion and logic, had brought this chapter of Hawthorne Hall to its close. Chapter 17. Outcome and Justiceth corridors of Hawthorne Hall were hushed as the fallout from Poirot's revelation settled into sober reality. News of Evelyn Cresswell's confession had spread swiftly among the staff, and by mid-morning the workshop stood empty of bloom tenders and apprentices. Only Hercule Poirot, Inspector Davis, and the four cleared suspects remained within its lofty walls, each bearing the quiet gravity of shared ordeal. Monsieur Poirot surveyed the evidence one final time. The ivory writing slip, now folded neatly beneath the rose stem, the vial dried of its fragrant oil but preserved in glass, the knife bearing a faint sheen of residual sap, and the torn wool fragments, their edges aligned like the teeth of a key. Each item spoke of a tragedy born of love's misguided demands. With a soft sigh, Poirot gathered them into his leather case and fastened the clasps. Inspector, he said, voice gentle, our duty here is nearly complete. The law will take Miss Cresswell into custody, and the matter of the wills must be resolved through legal channels. But the consequences of this sad affair extend beyond mere documents and confessions. We must see that those who remain once suspects find their own paths forward. Inspector Davis nodded gravely. I will see to Evelyn's transfer. The coroner's report is filed, and the solicitor in Mayfair has been instructed on the disposition of the estate as per the surviving instructions. The courts will address any gaps created by the torn will. Poirot inclined his head. Excellent. And what of our companions here? Let us offer them the courtesy of acknowledgment before they depart. He stepped to Lord Ashcombe, who waited with head bowed. Lord Ashcombe, Poirot began. Your role as patron and friend to Lady Pembroke never faltered in devotion. Though your debts and penchant for the private cigar misled us momentarily, your generosity will not be obscured by suspicion. I trust you will continue to support the Ateliers' rehabilitation in her memory. Ashcombe lifted his gaze, gratitude softening his stern features. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I shall endow a scholarship in Marguerite's name to train young florists regardless of inheritance or blood, lest any repeat this tragedy. Poirot turned to Geoffrey Calhoun. Monsieur Calhoun, you suffered misjudgment, yet your talent for design remains undiminished. May this experience remind you that creative passion must be tempered by integrity, and that the best designs emerge from collaboration, not subterfuge. Calhoun managed a small, rueful smile. I will remember, sir, and I shall offer my services. Pro bono to reimagine the workshops displays an homage to her artistry rather than a pursuit of profit. Next came Iris Delacroix, whose perfumery samples had sown confusion, Poirot placed a hand on her shoulder. "Mademoiselle Delacroix, your skill in combining essences is renowned. But your fear of professional loss led you astray. I trust you. We'll honor Lady Pembroke's memory by crafting a fragrance that carries her name. A true collaboration with the 8 Layers blooms." Delacroix bowed her head. "I will devote my next creation to her legacy, blending roses and lavender in a tribute to her vision." Finally, Poirot acknowledged Philip Parks, whose earnest loyalty had both aided and hindered the investigation. "Monsieur Parks, your devotion to Miss Cresswell is commendable. Yet your impulse to protect blinded you to the truth. You have now borne the weight of this burden. I encourage you to use your talents in service of transparency and rectification." Parks inhaled sharply, but offered a steady nod. "I will assist the new management in restoring the 8 Layers ledgers accurately and ensuring that every order reflects honesty and charity as Lady Pembroke intended." As each volunteer expressed gratitude and a commitment to honor Lady Pembroke's memory, the atmosphere shifted from one of sorrow to a tempered hope. Poirot watched them depart one by one. Their steps lighter now that the cloud of suspicion had lifted not alone with Inspector Davis. He closed the workshop door. "It is said that justice is blind, yet compassion allows us to see the humanity beyond guilt. We have delivered both." Davis exhaled, relief mingled with fatigue. "And the 8 Layer itself, do you believe it will survive this scandal?" Poirot turned to the neat rows of vases and the faint scent of peonies still lingering in the air. "An 8 Layer founded on love and artistry cannot be undone by a single storm. With proper stewardship and remembrance, it will bloom anew. The scars of tragedy will remain, but they will become part of its story, a testament to resilience." He took one last look at the evidence case. "Come. We have matters to file and formalities to see through. Then, with justice served and hearts laid bare, we shall leave Hawthorne Hall in its own capable hands." As they walked from the workshop into the sunlight of a late spring afternoon, the petals on the workshop sill fluttered gently, drifting free like fragments of confession laid to rest. And for Monsieur Hercule Poirot, the final act had drawn to a close, a mystery solved, justice delivered, and the fragile promise of new growth emerging amid the petals of loss. Chapter 18. The closing remark. The sun had dipped low, its final rays gilding the workshop's windows as a hush settled over Hawthorne Hall. The petals that once lay scattered in chaos now lay neatly gathered in a single crystal bowl, their colors muted by time and shadows. Against the backdrop of wilting blooms and polished wood, Hercule Poirot stood alone for a moment, gazing at the evidence case now empty save for the small, folded letter from Lady Pembroke to her niece, its words of guidance preserved in papyrus silence. Inspector Davis entered quietly, taking up a position at Poirot's side. "Mon Dieu, Monsieur Poirot," Davis said softly. "It has been a long affair. Do you feel content that every piece has found its place?" Poirot adjusted his bow tie and smiled. Gently, "The little grey cells have done their duty, mon ami. Yet it is the human heart that orchestrated the tragedy, and it is compassion that must now close this chapter." He turned toward the workshop door as the footsteps of the remaining household staff approached. Evelyn Cresswell walked ahead, escorted by a polite constable, her head held with fragile dignity. Behind her, Lord Ashcombe, Geoffrey Calhoun, Iris Delacroix, and Philip Parks followed in quiet procession, each bearing a single bloom, the white rose poised to symbolize innocence lost and lessons learned. Poirot stepped forward to greet them. Evelyn paused, stepping barefoot onto the polished floor, and laid her white rose in the crystal bowl alongside the other petals. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, voice soft but steady, "for guiding me to the truth I feared, yet needed to face." He inclined his head gravely. "Mademoiselle, The truth can wound, but it also heals. Your courage in confession has spared many sorrows that continued deception would have wrought. He turned to the assembled group, and you, who have endured suspicion and remorse, have shown that honesty, though painfully, is the surest path to peace. Inspector Davis cleared his throat. I will see to the formal statements. The will matters have been handed to the solicitor in Mayfair, and Evelyn's case will follow the proper course in the courts. The Ateliers' future is secure. Under Lord Ushcombe's endowment and the goodwill of all who remain. Lord Ushcombe dipped his head. I intend to honor Margaret's memory by establishing the Pembroke Foundation for Floristry, ensuring that her art and her philosophy that beauty must serve goodness endure. He placed his rose gently in the bowl. Calhoun, holding his rose, spoke quietly. I will redesign the workshop displays, free of charge, to reflect Lady Pembroke's spirit. May they inspire young florists to create with integrity. He laid his rose beside the others, Delacroix, her violet-hued gown catching the glow of lantern light, offered her blossom. I shall collaborate with the Atelier to craft a perfume in Lady Pembroke's name, a fragrance that blends peony, lavender, and rose, symbolizing both her creativity and her legacy. Parks stepped forward last, placing his bloom. I will manage the accounts with renewed purpose, ensuring that every order upholds the values she cherished: honesty, generosity, and artistic excellence. Poirot smiled at each in turn, then returned to Evelyn. Mademoiselle Cresswell, you may depart now under escort. Know that though justice demands its toll, your honesty and remorse have preserved the Atelier's honor. Your aunt's vision lives on in each petal and vial you have helped to protect. Evelyn bowed her head, tears gleaming in her eyes. Merci, Monsieur Poirot. I shall carry her lesson always. With that, she followed the constable out, her footsteps echoing softly into the corridor. When the door closed, Poirot turned to Davis. And now, mon ami, we conclude our business here, but let us not forget the hearts behind the evidence. He swept his gaze over the bowl of roses, their petals warmed by the last light of day. This tableau, once an emblem of sorrow, becomes a symbol of renewal. Inspector Davis nodded. Shall we leave them to their tasks? Poirot gathered his case, the folded letter secured in his breast pocket. We have honored the dead, restored justice, and offered a path forward. It is time for Hawthorne Hall to breathe again, unburdened by secrets. He paused, placing a final hand upon the workbench. I imagine Lady Pembroke would approve of the order. We have restored every bloom in its rightful place, every heart laid bare and healed. As they stepped into the late afternoon, the workshop's windows reflected a sky washed in pink and gold. The doors closed softly behind them, sealing the story within a tale of love, betrayal, artistry, and redemption, and in the quiet that followed, only the petals whispered the promise that, in the end, truth and compassion would prevail, even in the darkest of mysteries.